Oh, thank you. Actually, Jackson, six. Half a dozen. Thank you. That's good. That's good. Hi, how are you? I'm Rick. And your last name? O'Connell. I'm Rick Hodgins. Yes. That's Dave. Yeah. Stay here for 5 minutes.
I'll be right on the TV screen.
I think I'm going to be Rick, I'm going to move this seat up beside you so you can have company. So I can keep having company.
No, sometimes I stand over the back door.
That's all right. Okay. Equal time, you know.
It's great for me. Yeah, back to back. That's what I
Yes. You should, you know, just make sure. Good.
You were the only one that had one.
I'm here talking to
Somebody get settled.
Boy, she's double fisted. She's a thirsty girl.
Good evening. Welcome to the February 26th, 2018 meeting of the Sacramento Regional Transit District Board of Directors. With the clerk, please call the roll to establish quorum.
Director Budge. Here. Director Hanson.
Here.
Director Harris.
Here.
Director Hume.
Here.
Director Jennings.
Here.
Director Miller.
Here.
Director Morin.
Here.
We understand Director Tully's on the way. Director Chenier. Director Chenier. Director Cerna. Chair Kennedy.
Here.
With that, we have a quorum at 100 votes.
Right,
This meeting of the Sacramento Regional Transit District will be cablecast without interruption on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel. Tonight's meeting will air on Wednesday, February 28th at 6 p.m. and Saturday, March 3rd at noon, and webcast at www.sacramento.gov satmetrocable.tv. It is also closed captioned. Members of the audience wishing to address the board should fill out a speaker card located at the rear of the room and provide it to me or Adam. Please speak into the microphone and state your name for the record. We would appreciate everyone turning off their cell phones. Thank you. With that, we have a quorum at 100 votes, but I think I said that.
Yes, you did. Will you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item.
First item is public addresses the board on matters not on the agenda.
And I have several cards, starting with Barbara Stanton. Arthur, go ahead. All right, that's fine. You got time. We got plenty of time.
Good evening, directors, Henry, and chairperson, Barbara Stanton, ridership for the Masses Group. I'm here with co-founder Jennifer McSweeney, and Shirley couldn't make it, but we are honored to be here tonight to present the Top of Banana Award to Cindy Brooks, clerk of the board. Ridership for the Masses presents the Top Banana Award to an individual who has made a difference for public transit riders or an organization who has made a positive change to public transit in the Sacramento region, and this includes bike and ped. And we've done 3 so far, one Bonnie Pennell, the late Bonnie Pennell, Roberta McGlashan, and Maggie Coulter with Sac Ride Human. So this is our fourth award, and we will be giving another one out at the end of the year. So we'll be looking for organizations to give them out to this time. So if Cindy can come up, and we can present her with the Top Banana Award. Jennifer has the certificate, and the certificate says, in recognition of your dedicated service and support to the Regional Transit District, transit riders, and advocates. Thank you very much and congratulations. And she gets a little top banana to put on her desk. So there it is there, the Top Banana Award.
Thank you all.
Would you like to say something, Cindy? Would you like to say something?
I think it's set. Okay. Put it on the other side. Is it set? Okay. Good? Yes.
Motion passes at 100 votes.
Okay. Yes? Thank you. Oh, thank you very much. And this will be posted to our website. So,
I'm on the website now.
Thank you very much. Robert Copeland?
I got a question for you. When are you going to do something about the Del Paso light rail station? In the evening, that is a dangerous light rail station. It should have security. Because last Christmas, me and my nephews were getting off the bus. We was threatened, and then somebody wanted to sell me meth. I think that's wrong. And what is this about some of the bus benches having bars going this way? They should be removed. Those bars should be removed. What is going on with RT? I'm going to have a couple of other items, but those were later, so I'm going to skip that for now. But how come some of the bus benches are longer than other bus benches? Like the one over by Privilege Community Collaborative, you can sit 2 people on it if you're real, like my size. But one over by J Street, and by the Safeway on Alhambra, it's a lot longer. Why? I don't get RT at all. I'll save my rest of my comments for later, and I will have more comments.
Thank you very much. Stacy Wetling?
Good evening. I just want to, this is based on kind of the presentation from last board meeting on the micro transit pilots project. And I'm aware of RT doing several pilot projects. And moving forward, I request that there be successes and outcomes and metrics reported to the public. So I know that there's some great things happening, but the public, I think, should also be aware of those things. And that's the public comment for now.
Thank you, Stacy, and you get an A for penmanship, by the way. Thank you very much. Sarah Kerber, Sac True.
Hi, my name is Sarah Kerber. I'm with the Sacramento Transit Riders Union. I wanted to talk about something that our members have been bringing up at our meetings a lot recently, and that's effectively communicating during a service outage that happens on the light rail. There was one specifically that happened on last Friday, February 23rd on the Blue Line from Marconi to Alkali Flat, and there was a bus bridge that was done in between where the outage was. And we had a lot of riders comment that they were confused about what was happening, what were possible alternative routes. A lot of the buses were overcrowded, they said. So we've brought this up before about making real-time PA announcements so that riders know up and down the system what's going on, what some alternative routes are. I know that we have apps that can push out information. I don't remember getting an email that announced that there was an issue. So just there was a post that was done on Facebook, there was a post that was done on Twitter about it, but trying to come up with some alternative real-time solutions when there are outages that can be communicated to riders so they can help plan their lives and their travel better. And SACTRU is happy to talk with staff, happy to talk with board members about some solutions, but we would like to begin putting this into long-term planning. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Jeffrey Tardigia. Jeffrey.
Board. How do you deal with your responsibilities? I puzzle that because you delegate to, should we say, Henry Lee these authority, but you still have the responsibility. How are you tracking the responsibility of what is getting done and what is not getting done? As has already been suggested, you've had many pilot programs, and there's never been reports back on any of them to the public about what in the world came out of them. How is the board addressing the many issues that sit in front of it with once a month meeting? And like some, as several, love to read their emails. Do they know exactly why we're doing a gasoline contract today? When we're proposing and pushing for stronger environmental zero emission going on, it just seems like the North Natomas deal that doesn't balance out because, and how long those brand new gasoline buses are going to be used. I hope you guys have read, your agenda items to what in the world's going on. To your later on meeting where we're discussing of your, shall we say, rider optimization, and yet everything that's not included in that. And I see Doug here, and I'm still wondering, is this for the 40 suggestions that he has made for RT, how many of them have been implemented, and how much after June will his, $500,000, contract, be continued? And I see yet you still are going to have more consultants come in here rather than having any expertise, for RT about either rider optimization or the issues for the next 15 years, 20 years in the future. It's real interesting to see what's going on with the streetcar and the other, fascinating bits through there and material that's going on. And yet, I haven't seen anything, in RT's possible horizons discussing that. Same thing goes on about, the San Joaquin corridor being now producing where the, I believe it's the Ultima, is talking about coming up 19th Street with because you can't bring any more Amtrak trains in. There's only those two allowed on the present train route. Plus, in May, you're going to have, a huge project of trains and talking about total integration of passenger riders up and down the state. Are you ready for that?
Thank you, Jeffrey. Pat Williams.
Yeah, good evening. First thing I'd like to say is that the board, you guys can save millions and millions of dollars by bringing paratransit back into RT's fold with the ADA services. You don't need two different managements. You don't need two HRs. You don't need legal from two different outfits. You have the baby bus division over there at McClellan. If you reincorporate things, I think you'd have more efficiencies. It goes on in corporate America all the time. The drivers are ready to do that. And the big thing is this, you're going to get synergy out of that. McClellan's going to be there for a long, long time. And I think that you'd be better off trying to work that out to try to get the efficiencies. So that's my comment. Good luck, gentlemen.
Thank you.
And lady.
Arthur Ketterling.
Good evening, Board. My name is Arthur Ketterling. And what I was wanting to, I wasn't going to speak this evening, but I thought this would be important to mention. I came off the train, I forget the car numbers, either 134B or 106B, but there was two people on the light rail that nearly got hurt and all, standing in the doorways like where they open up at. And I did get to see the head sign of light rail, and it was heading downtown. So that would be toward K Street, I know that. But I wanted to have you be aware of it. And I had mentioned to the two that was standing there, I told them that you should get out of the doorways because of that could be opening at any time, and it's dangerous. And they replied and stated, well, that's all right, that we're going to go out that way anyway. And that was their last comment. And I wanted to report that to you.
Thank you, Arthur. All right, that's all the cards that I have for items not on the agenda. And next we have consent. I have been asked to, we have cards, or I've been asked by a board member to pull item 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, and 9. Is there anyone on the board that would like to pull item 1, 4, or 8?
Move approval.
Yeah. Okay, we have a motion by Director Budge. Okay, Director Budge, and a second by Director Jennings for item 1, 4, and 8. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain?
Motion carries at 100 votes. So the next item would be item number 2.
Number 2. Actually,
I'm sorry,
could you read item number 2 into the record?
I would. Resolution delegating authority to the general manager, CEO, to approve an agreement for operation of the North Natomas Flyer bus service with the North Natomas Transportation Management Association, and Mark Lonergan is here to answer any questions.
I believe Director Harris had questions.
So
One of our members here in the audience just asked a couple of questions about the vehicles that are likely to be procured for the North Natomas Transportation Management Authority and moving to a gasoline vehicle instead of CNG. And I queried Mark about that earlier. Since it was brought up here, I'd like to ask again exactly why we would go from natural gas to gasoline-powered engines, and CARB's involvement in that as well.
So a couple of comments on that. The buses that we're currently using in North Natomas are basically a 29-foot cutaway, which is like a paratransit vehicle, a little bit longer. And unlike our big buses, there isn't an engine manufacturer that makes a dedicated CNG engine. They're all conversions. Our experience with the existing North Natomas buses have been abysmal. The engines are a maintenance nightmare. They're not reliable, particularly in the summer months. We actually have to replace the buses with full-size buses in order to provide the service. We have related issues with powering the air conditioning off the engine. It derates when it overheats. So we haven't been able to find an engine for that bus in CNG that we're comfortable in being able to maintain. We do have CNG cutaway buses in our CBS fleet in a smaller size. Honestly, we're having many of the same issues that we experienced in Natomas with those buses as well. We are actively looking for a better solution, but right now, in order to meet the needs of this contract, a gasoline engine is about all that we can find. It's my understanding that CARB doesn't even certify CNG engines in the the smaller size anymore, displacement. I think that there's still a CNG engine that they would recognize in this larger cutaway vehicle, but the maintenance issues have just killed us. And
the longevity of these vehicles is
5 years.
5 years.
Yeah. Well, the engines with these would argue it's less, but the bus has a 5-year useful life generally. We replace these buses frequently. We'd love to see a zero-emission alternative here. I know a number of us regularly talk to manufacturers about that need because you fall below 30 feet and there isn't really a heavy-duty choice in a vehicle here.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
All right, any other questions? Number 2.
Move item 2.
Second.
All right, Director Hume moves, seconded by Vice Chair Hansen. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
Motion carries at 100 votes. Item number 3, resolution approving a contract with Creative Bus Sales for purchase of transit vehicles through the California Association for Coordinated Transportation, Morongo Basin Transit Authority Joint Procurement. And who's answering questions? That would be Mark Lonergan here to answer your question.
Okay, are there any questions from the board on item 3?
No.
No? Okay, we do have two cards. First, Helen O'Connell.
Thank you. Helen O'Connell, Disability Organizational Group for Initiating Total Equality Vice President. And I'm also the Transportation Chair for our group. I'm a little confused on why RT is being a broker. It looks like he's being a broker for the smaller entity to get a better price. That's what it looks like to me, but I'm confused why RT is jumping into that role, if my understanding is correct. And we're also jumping into YOLO. Is RT managing its money so well that it can absorb these different entities and do all that stuff when we're still struggling to meet RT's basic needs? We're still 200 buses short of our needs, and we're dipping into everybody else's pie. seems like it's not conducive to getting us out of debt and running the organization physically, so that we can get our own buses in the right situation before we go out and do somebody else's buses. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lonergan?
Sure, I can comment really quickly. This action actually ties on to the previous one. This is actually allowing us to buy the buses for Natomas that that we just talked about. Let me correct one statement too. Actually, CARB doesn't certify the bigger buses. I had it backwards from before. We're not acting as a broker or anything here. What we're doing is taking advantage of a statewide procurement, so we don't have to physically bid the procurement of the vehicles. We're just able to buy them off an existing contract for that service.
Thank you.
Move the item.
We have one more public comment. Jeffrey Tartagia.
Could change my
Mark, you helped answer some of the questions on there, but 8 vehicles you're purchasing for $1.5 million. Is that my correct understanding? And that's why when item number 7, the $1.5 million later on going on, I'm just looking for a little better clarification. So it's that much that it costs for those vehicles?
So it's actually 1.113745. So let's say 1.1 million for the 8 vehicles. And these are 5-year cab. It's a body on truck frame, typical, like a paratransit vehicle would be, but a little bit longer.
So Jeffrey, can you, if you can, pose your questions to the board and not directly to staff, that would be helpful.
Sorry, Patrick, after all the comments at SACOG through there and the other issues through there, I'm just curious now, you can use the comparison of paratransit. What does a paratransit vehicle at 29 feet, and I think you're talking about a 35-foot vehicle?
Yeah, these are actually 32, and the paratransit and these vehicle costs are very similar depending on what you put on them. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. We have a motion by Director Chenier, second by Vice Chair Hansen. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
Motion carries at 100 votes. Next item is item 5, resolution approving revisions to the bylaws of the Mobility Advisory Council, and Janice Labrato's here to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions from the board? No, we have one card, Rick Hodgkins.
Coming, Rick.
Thanks. Rick Hodgkins, disability rights advocate, disability rights activist, and disability rights extremist. I also am a member of Capital People First, which is an organization run by and for people with developmental disabilities. 2 of us take both paratransit and regional transit. Me and another member who's not here. But the other, what I wanted to talk about with regards to this item is why are we looking to lower the threshold of board members on the members of the MAC? The reason I'm asking that is we should have someone that represents each disability group. Now, the blind, I know that Jeff Tom is the chair of the MAC, last I heard. He represents people of the blind community. But we need someone on there from, the cross-disability community, like from RIL. Since Tim Schwank's death last year, at the tail end of last year, do we have someone on the MAC from Alta California Regional Center? We need to make sure that all disabilities and senior groups are represented on the MAC, not just a limited. All disabilities need to be represented on the MAC. Once again, that's my only concern. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. It's Janice Labrado, Director of Accessible Services and Chair in the RT Board. We are not lowering the membership. The membership is remaining the same at 17. What we did is we went from the past makeup was 11 agency members, and we reduced the agency members to 9 and increased the at-large members from 6 to 8. And we are in the process of having somebody from Alta Regional Center that's interested, and he's been attending our meetings, and it's thought that he is going to be applying. We try our best. Part of the language, too, what we've done is at-large representatives, of which, in seeking representatives, SAC-RT and the council will strive to achieve a balanced representation of service and advocacy interests, as well as diversity in race, ethnicity, and gender. Preferably agency or organizational representatives and at-large representatives will be users of RT fixed route or paratransit systems. So we are looking for a diverse membership, and I do have some people right now. I also have somebody from Area 4 on aging that is asked for an application that's been attending our meetings, and I would encourage you, Rick, if you have anybody who's interested, to have them contact me directly or Accessible Services, because we do have several openings on the Mobility Advisory Council. We also have language in the bylaws that tries to have, if the chair one term is a representative of the senior community, then we want the vice chair to be a representative of the disabled community. But so we're trying to get as much diversity as we can, and I would appreciate your help in this.
Who's the person from Alta California Regional?
It's Silas.
Silas, don't know him. He must be a new guy. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board? Is there
I'd move the item.
motion? Director Miller?
Second.
Second by Director Morin. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Next item, please.
Motion carries at 100 votes. Item number 6, resolution amending and restating Title VI budget procedures of the Sacramento Regional Transit Administrative Code. And Brent Bernicker is here to answer any questions.
All right, first we have one card, Brenda Anderson.
Hi. I'm still coming back with the same disparate impact concern. We've been working on it a little bit. I'm not sure how far we've sit there and listen, but he gets the message. It's a real big concern because you're going to have to keep those cash boxes in there, but you also got to transition the people into the Connect card. So this is my biggest concern, is that you did it in the first place and you shouldn't have did it. It wasn't very nice to go ahead and push what you're doing on your agenda and leave somebody else out in the cold behind, which is not very nice. So basically I want to say is I wish you to continue to move forward on your addressing this disparate impact concern with the Title VI of the Connect card. It is really a very serious issue. And I think the young man is actually being very diligent about it, but I'm just here to make sure you guys stay with it, stay on it. It's important.
Thank you very much, Brenda. Is there any questions from the board?
Yes.
Director Budge.
Question I have is on the section relates to minor fund transfers between operating and capital budgets. The increase in the aggregate amounts is significant. I don't see $500,000 as necessarily being minor, and I guess I understand that inflation may have increased the cost of certain equipment and purchases and supplies, but I guess I need to, Brett, either you or Henry, somebody to, what is the additional flexibility you're going to need? I don't see this occurring all that frequently, and it just seems to me that even though this has been a practice now for, I guess, going on the 9th year, since we last made changes. I don't know if this section was changed, but I guess I need to understand a little more of the justification. You've offered this in this packet here, but it occurs to me that this is a significant increase over and above what we already authorized, the 50 and the 250 to 100 and now $500,000 to move in between budget categories. And I don't see that as being an insignificant number.
Sure. So maybe I could just start out with, I did want to
kind of come back to Title VI. The Title VI that Brenda was referring to is a different Title VI than the budget Title VI analysis. And I do appreciate Brenda's comments, and we are working with her. To Director Natoli, yes, what we are doing is we're looking for ways to have flexibility when we're working. Is this?
Sorry.
I'm on that. Am
Quickly,
I?
quickly.
I have not,
You got 30
start over.
30 seconds, Brett.
Okay. I got some pressure. Okay. So
That's item 7. We're going to give you 2 minutes. So.
right. I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to find ways that we can, when the public comes and they're looking for changes to our projects, we have various projects like the Wad-I-80 elevator. We have various projects like a roof repair, something that, and that's actually a great example where we had a major roof repair that was needed at the BMF2 facility. That roof repair was budgeted about $350,000. These are urgent things that need to be taken care of when you have leaks and things like that. Back in 2009, I can't comment. It was a different time. What we're looking to do is actually get more ability to make changes and be more nimble. What we are not doing is I guess what we're not doing is not giving the information to you, but what we're saying is we're still going to come back and bring these changes forward so you'll be able to see what we're doing. But we're looking to have the ability to make those changes so that we don't wait for a board action that could take, a month or two to come back and receive
Okay.
action.
Let me just follow. I appreciate the
Sure.
additional explanation, I guess, Mr. Chair. So let me understand that if in an urgent situation as you've described, I would assume that there is some authority for a general manager under those types of circumstances to operate, and certainly, I guess if worst came to worst, to call a special board meeting if you needed authority to do something of that nature. But what I saw here is basically transfer between operating and capital, and I don't know, does that work the other way too? You can take from capital to operating, and basically a $500,000 float either way is pretty significant.
So the transfer between operating and capital is also important, where there's going to be times when we will embark on a project where we need to use operating funds to fund a capital project. What we need to be, we may use staff time where we're going to actually work on a project. And I can think of a good one right now. We have the 65th Street project that we're working on selling with the developer. We may want to use staff time to develop plans, work with the city, and that's capitalizable cost that should be put on the capital budget. So what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to say, we are going to spend X amount of staff time, $20,000, $30,000, and we want to be able to do a budget transfer of operating funds to move it to that capital project so that we can assign capital costs to that project. And by doing that, we're able to reduce our operating expenses because those costs can be capitalized to that project. So that's part of the transfer between operating and capital.
Okay, just one follow on them, because now you really piqued my interest, because this allowed, using your example, it may have just been, again, the number you selected, but this, existing authority allows for $50,000 for each project. So your example could have been done under current authority.
I was just using an example.
Yeah, I know, right. Current authority. But would you accrue that much cost between board meetings or in advance of an item being able to come to this board? Did you actually go right to the 100,000 that quickly?
Well, it'd be circumstance based. I think if that's something where the board's not comfortable, we can make this change. If you want to, I guess what we did is we looked for ways to make us more nimble, and to us, seeing that our budgets coming into capital projects are more important. We're being asked to move quicker. We're being asked to move more nimble, and I think that was the reason for this. Okay. And so I don't know if that's up to the board to.
Yeah.
Yep.
One final question.
Sure.
So the money can only move from operating to capital. It doesn't move. You can't move back from capital to operating under this particular.
No, I think you should. Between operating and capital, I see it as both ways.
It moves both ways.
You can move it from operating to capital, or again, you'd have to look at the restriction of the funds. I can't take. Okay, so with the exception of that, so you can't. So here's a good example. We We have Measure A funds, we have STA funds, we have LTF funds that we can assign up front to be used for capital purposes. They could have been flexible funds at the time, but we decided that was a local match for a project that we wanted to do. The Green Line is a great example. So you have those funds where you can put it to a capital project. It's flexible, and so we want to be able to move it back and forth as needed. And maybe does that help answer that question?
Thank you.
Okay.
Director Budge.
So my questions were really similar because
Okay.
In the scheme of a $160 million budget, $500,000 is not a large number,
Right.
but when you break it down into individual situations, the $500,000 or your the other example you gave was only like 20 or 30,000, except that you want to up
I was
it
just
to
using a recent
50,000.
one. Yeah, I'm sorry.
And so I was interested in some examples of where you might have needed the ability to do this, and the fact that it should have been a board decision based on a rule from 2009 was really a handicap. Given the fact that with federal and state grants, the way in which the income around here is compartmentalized, it would seem that switching back and forth between budgets might be an issue with auditing by the federal or state grant makers.
If there are restrictions on the fund, a Measure A is a great example where they ask us in advance, how would you like to spend the money? We go to SACOG and we indicate, here's our Measure A plan of finance, or the STA, and here's our plan of finance, how we'll spend it. Later on, we can decide, you know, that purpose that we had 10 years ago, that project that was so important is now changed, and so now we have flexibility. So we always have to look to the law, we have to look to the regulation to make sure we have followed all the rules, I guess, in that case.
Mr. Lee.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I believe the real justification here, or the fundamental justification here is we have so many funding sources.
Yes.
And we're up to like 100 different funding sources, and we are pursuing lots of new, potential funding streams. Our budget department, grants department staff have worked very diligently to try to, move funding away, around to address different, concerns. I do not think this is really, because board already gave me the emergency, situation. I can, make some funding commitment, then ask a board to approve later on. So it's not that time-sensitive issue. It really gives staff some, flexibility, and it's so, after here, different comments, I would like to put this off from the agenda, not ask board to approve. No. We can work with the existing conditions, and we're okay. It just gives more flexibility to the staff. Sorry, Brent.
That's fine.
Push on this very hard.
We should have said that about 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, and maybe one comment. I think when we're looking at this from an operating budget, we do have a $161 million operating budget, but our capital budget is much larger than that. So that, again, that's kind of that comment. But that being said, I think.
Vice Chair Hansen.
Just one quick comment. It wouldn't be here if there wasn't some problem we were trying to address, and it sounds like that given the general manager's authority, we can do some things, but is there sufficient authority? I mean, I'm fine with putting it off, but is there something that we do need to address here, Mr. General Manager, just for cash flow purposes or exigency?
It's really about give staff some flexibility to move funding around in different categories, and it's to move the process more efficiently and effectively in the process. If this is some concern, we from the public and the board, we don't really have to do this.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm okay either way.
And I
Up
would,
to board.
And I would say section 6.2.1.3, transfers within the capital budget, that was probably where this was originally founded, because as new projects will come up, even if it's a $1 project, if it's not been approved by the board, we can't proceed with the project. So again, this is one of those ones where we're trying to get flexibility within a category to be able to create a new budget so that we can work on something. But I think what we could do to better respond to Director Natoli's and Director Budge's comments is we can bring this back with more specific examples. My budget director couldn't make it today, so I think he would have probably been able to answer this a little bit better for me. But I can bring those examples back. Would that help?
Mr. Chair, I wasn't intending to put the whole thing over. There's that one category. There is some tie into some of these other changes, but again, the other flexibility seemed to make sense from, at least in good parts. So I know it was the upper caps, and that's mentioned in at least one of the other ones of these. So, it wasn't certainly my intent to put the entire item over. I mean, if you want to take that one section and...
Well, it sounds like it needs to spend a little more time in the past.
Yeah.
So,
All right, fine.
at the recommendation of the general manager, I'll entertain a motion to drop from the agenda.
So move to table the item.
Okay, moved by Director Budge, second by Director Harris. All those in favor?
Aye. Abstain.
One abstention.
Yep. Abstain.
With that abstention, the motion carries to continue the item with, it's not 100 if he abstains. Natoli.
Yeah, just
You had one abstention, yeah.
sorry again.
86 votes.
Okay, thank you. Item number 7, please read the record.
No, wait a minute. I didn't. It wasn't me that abstained. It was Director
Oh,
Hansen.
It was me.
Director Hansen, I'm sorry.
Director Hansen.
I apologize.
Don's vote is worth more than mine.
Don's worth more than all of us.
Be careful, they'll take away that top banana.
And that's okay.
Okay, pass it with 91. Next.
Next, item number 7, resolution amending and restating Title III of the Sacramento Regional Regional Transit Administrative Code relating to rules of procedures, and Laura Ham is here to answer any questions.
Vice Chair Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I asked that this be pulled because I think there's some public concern about it. And so what I'd like to do is ask that it be postponed so that the community can engage in conversation with the staff and the board about it to the first meeting in April. That gives us about 2 months, a month and a half, excuse me, to work on it. And I'd also like a couple other things to be considered if the board is willing. One, to move the closed session back to the beginning, because we have had some situations where quorum becomes an issue. To consider moving the GM report to the end, so we can do the business items first before we do the non-business items. And then as far as the changes to public comment, I'd like to see the 8-minute limit removed, but rather consider the consent calendar as one item for the purposes of public comment. And yeah, those are the two other things. So that would be my motion to continue, and then incorporate those changes, assuming there's board, that the board's interested.
Chair seconds. Any comments? Director Natoli?
Yeah, just on the motion. So I heard Director Hansen suggest some changes, but we're just voting on the motion to continue.
It's just direction to staff so that when it comes back, those changes can be considered.
Okay, I mean, you put those all in the mix, because I assume we wouldn't have that on the table.
It's just
to continue. Okay, all right.
It's just direction.
Yeah. Director Budge.
So just with the caveat that it may be that the most important issue is the limiting public comment from 3 minutes to 2 minutes. And so I would hope staff would realize that there may be directors who don't agree with that also.
Yeah.
I think that was probably assumed.
Yeah. And just to be clear, I assume that would be debated at the April
Right.
meeting.
Okay.
But there were some refinements to the agenda that, as I thought about it, so that we can
Quite frankly,
maintain
you
quorum.
have some good suggestions.
Yep.
Mr. Miller has a comment.
Yes.
Thank you.
Director Miller.
Regarding the time to speak, the thing I didn't see in there, and it may be I'm just missing it, is that I thought the chair should have the discretion to lengthen or shorten the time.
I would agree with that.
And most chairs would. And so we consider adding that if it's not already in there, regardless of the 2 or 3. I mean, different meetings, different situations, different topics. The number of people speaking all play into that, so.
Director Miller, that's already in there.
Okay, then.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Thank you.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? So there's no point in taking public testimony because it's going to be different when it comes back before us most likely, so we will table that as well. All right.
All right. Next item is item number 9, awarding contracts for on-call general planning support services. And Laura Ham is here to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions from the board? No, we do have public questions. Stacy Wentling.
Hi, Stacy Wentling with SAC-TRU, member of SAC-TRU. So my main problem with this is that I believe routine needs should not be contracted. So the route optimization, it's a great opportunity. There's going to be a lot of changes. And I think with the implementations and the changes that occur, there needs to be ongoing evaluation in order to just ensure objectives are accurately being achieved. I don't think you can get that with a contract. I think that should be paid staff, and that's it.
Thank you. Sarah Kerber.
Hi, my name is Sarah Kerber. I'm with SAC-TRU. I was all ready for a big speech battle, but I guess I'll move on to planning.
Sorry to disappoint.
So our members request that the planning department be fully staffed and have the resources needed to be able to provide an efficient and effective transportation system. We've seen over the past year many changes to the planning department on the scope of the work that they're doing. We have the new route optimization survey that's going on. The projects outlined in this budget or in this board item were corridor planning, statistics, service planning, service assessments, transit service planning guidelines, policies and performance measures, plan drafting, grant management, analyzing and reporting, project oversight and management, and public information services. To our membership, that sounds like the basic requirements and duties of a general planning department. And if RT's planning department doesn't have the staff that it needs to be able to do those, we don't think that going out piece by piece to get help with that is going to provide us with an effective and comprehensive transit system. So we would like to ask the board and the staff to consider in the ongoing budget negotiations for the upcoming year to fund the planning department in a way that allows them to function effectively. If it requires more staff or other resources, we request that you guys consider that so that we have a public transit system that works for riders. Thank you.
Helen O'Connell.
Helen O'Connell. I think that going out for contract after contract after contract is a very expensive way of doing something. And I think that if you have that much work to do and you need help, you should hire somebody to do the job in-house, because that's, in my estimation, the most cost-effective way of doing the job, because contract after contract, you'll have to pay legal fees and all this other stuff too that goes into putting on new contracts. And I reiterate everything that Sarah Gerber said. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Jeffrey Tardigia.
Well, Patrick, Henry Lee already knows my attitude dealing with contracts. And my problem with this is that, like previously you've done for a video thing through there and expanding supposedly fiber optic, yet you have no knowledge. contracts, how high, how much, for how long. We have the example right here of a contract that started under $100,000 and has expanded continuously. So please, Patrick, when we award contracts, specifically spelled out the purpose, the amount, this is just awarding, should we say, grant.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Any other questions from the board? Is there a motion?
I'll second.
Moved by Vice Chair Hanson, second by Director.
Good.
Warren? Yes?
Just a question. So will the consultants work at the direction of our planning staff? I mean, there's a lot of ways to structure that. Obviously, they're working for us as the agency contracting for their services. But then what is the structure? Again, do they work independently? Do they work under ULOR? Do they work under James? Who do they work under?
Yes, the consultant would work under the direction of the planning department. Probably most typically it would be James Boyle, our director of planning, and the planning team developed the scope of work for these services.
And I think I just want to make one comment on the motion here. So this is a pretty broad range of things that they could be involved in. Is there some anticipation about what some of the first task orders may be? Obviously, we're going into this with some idea we're going to be using the services because we don't have the sufficient staffing, I guess, to staff up for some of these. Is this all tied back to the route optimization study, or is this for a lot of the other things that were mentioned in the general purpose that was?
The scope is fairly broad to give us some flexibility. A good example would be the extensive grant applications that we submitted this year and some of the technical work associated with those grant applications.
Okay, so that's kind of the primary example. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
Motion carries at 100 votes. Item number 10, the general manager's report.
Sir.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the board and the public. Sorry. Early this month, SACRT was excited to partner with Sacramento area museums and visit California to provide a free bus and light rail service as part of the 20th Annual Sacramento Museum Day. We had approximately 3,000 boardings during the course of the day, carrying people to and from museums and their residents. We're very proud to partner with community groups like this on the events like Museum Day that make Sacramento a great place to live, work, and play. Also, we have effectively implemented our on-demand microtransit project in Central Heights, and now we're receiving many enthusiastic inquiries from various communities and peer agencies in North America. The day before we launched this project, actually, City of Toronto Transit Authority, which is a big one, in Canada, reached out to us for best practices. Another subject, 2 weeks ago, Trump administration finally released its long-awaited infrastructure plan. The proposal calls for an investment of $1.5 trillion over 10 years, but assumes that $1.3 trillion will come from private investment or state and local sources. Furthermore, the plan itself represents a significant departure from how the federal government has traditionally viewed infrastructure and its role in supporting state and local projects. Historically, the federal government has provided a 50-50 cost share match for new transit projects and other infrastructure projects through the Capital Investment Grant Program. So the major capital projects we have had in the past, we get up to 50% of federal funding. The administration's proposal right now calls for shrinking the federal share to 20% of the project cost in the future, a significant departure from how projects currently funded. The transit industry has voiced our different opinions on this. Congress will consider the merits of this proposal later this year.
I'm
say
sorry,
we
I'm
are
sorry, Henry.
putting the,
Helen, could you? Thank you very much. Go ahead.
We just put this up. Last fall we start a project called Reimagine What IAD Transfer Center, which is the most popular and congested transfer center. So I would like to ask Mark and Nisa to give a brief update on what's going on with this project. And then after that, Brent will brief board on the financial condition last month and year to date.
So I'm here before you just to give you a quick update on where we are on this project. And I'm really here tonight because as we've been engaged in the public outreach, there have been comments and concerns regularly raised, particularly over the elevators at Watt I-80 and the issues that we've had there historically. And as you know, the station is over 30 years old now. It's been in service since the very beginning of our light rail system. And it's on a section of Watt Avenue that's very challenged from a crime perspective. And we've had some issues with that, and of course the tragic shooting of the deputy at that location. So we've really gone out and we've looked at it, and our planning department has just done a fabulous job with this, and talked to the community about what should we do with the station. And we've talked to Walk Sacramento, the Watt Avenue P-bid, SAC-TRU's been involved out there looking at it as well, Sacramento County. We've had, and I'll get into some of the details here in a minute, we've done surveying, we've had public meetings and so forth to try and sort this out. And we will be bringing all of that back to you in April at the April board meeting in detail, with the hopes of reaching a recommendation on what we should do at this location. The public outreach, while it's been great, has taken us some time. And the only money we have in this project right now is the $800,000 that we've set aside for elevator replacement. Some of the options would not require an elevator replacement. At least one of the options would reduce the number of elevators from 2 to 1. So we've got some things in play where we don't want to spend that money now on these elevators and then not need them in the future. So real quickly, and in the interest of time tonight, there's more information in this presentation. This was a presentation actually provided internally to RT staff. What I really want to highlight is on this one screen here, the second screen, and talk a little bit about the outreach project that we've done. As I said, the planning department has done a fabulous job reaching out to folks on this subject. We've done intercept surveys of people using the facility. We've had 14 stakeholder interviews. We've had 2 walk audits. We've had 3 public meetings, 2 presentations to MAC, and 2 virtual workshops that have provided us a ton of information and suggestions on what we should be doing at this station into the future. As I think we've mentioned before, options really range from closing it and having all the buses transfer at Roseville Road to a number of improvements at the station itself. And again, that's the detail that's coming back to you in April. Some of what we've been hearing is all the things that, frankly, you would expect our customers to want us to see there. Safe, reliable, and convenient transfers, greater safety through the redesign of the station, consistent maintenance. Right now we have maintenance there twice a day cleaning the station, and honestly it's not enough for the abuse the station takes. We have security there all the time that we're in service as well. Of course, user experience, comfort, and positive energy there and activity. ADA access is a high priority. Of course, the problem we've been experiencing is with those doggone elevators. They're, as I say, 30 years old. They do need to be replaced, but we need to do it smartly based on the ultimate design of the station. Maintenance and security are the biggest issues. Pedestrian safety, bicycle and ADA access are some of the things that people are concerned about in actually closing the station itself. There's really poor access to Roseville Road from a pedestrian perspective. We've been hearing comments back on our the bus route realignments, if we were to move the buses off of Watt Avenue and the impacts that we would see there. And we've looked at literally everything we can do, from relocating the transfers to Roseville Road to major modifications of the station itself. Again, those are the things in detail we'll bring back in April. We're very close to being ready for that review with the board and the public. And so with that, let me answer any questions, and then invite Lisa up to talk a little bit about security.
Director Cerna.
Thank you. So, Mark, you said the station's cleaned twice a day, and Director Budge and I kind of had the same simultaneous reaction, which, you know, it's a big station. When you say it's being cleaned, what does that mean? Does that mean it's being cleaned from top to bottom? Does it just mean it's being pressure washed?
Well, let me verify with Mr. Nance, because it's his area, but we're basically cleaning it from top to bottom twice a day. We are pressure washing it in twice a week. We are picking up the trash. Come on, Neil. I'll let you provide the detail. We're pressure washing it twice a week. I'm sorry. We're picking up the trash on a twice a day basis. What would you like to add?
You got it.
Yep.
I mean, isn't it kind of like painting the Golden Gate Bridge? It's that big, right? I mean, once you're done comprehensively cleaning, aren't you starting all over again if you're doing it twice daily? And if so, the fact that it's still in the condition it is kind of begs the question, even if you did it 3 times a day, what would that entail, and would you get much bang for the buck?
So we have the feeling that there isn't any amount of cleaning that's going to keep up with the problem. And what we're doing now is the current level of cleaning. And we've played around with that quite a bit in terms of the level of cleaning that we do. And it seems to be a bit insurmountable in its current design. We have a lot of abuse that goes on in that station. People use various areas of it as a restroom. People are leaving trash all over the place. People are doing things in the stairwells and some of the corners that we need to actually, frankly, close off that are not socially acceptable. And all of that contributes to the problems at this station. And those problems come from a larger problem along Watt Avenue, frankly, in that area that we can't correct as regional transit.
So when you come back and we hear a more comprehensive explanation of what our options are, we're not going to hear clean more?
Well, we might have clean more, but we're going to try and limit the area we can clean. So in our preliminary look at options for leaving the station there, we've looked at some things to create more space and less space, right? So right now at the upper level, we have bus stops on both sides as an example, and they're small spaces. We've talked about consolidating on one side, without getting into the detail, and making that area bigger for a waiting area, which makes it easier to secure and clean, reduces the elevator requirement, as an example. So we would only need one elevator at that if that configuration works for us. We were looking at options in that sense of closing off the area under Watt Avenue altogether, because you wouldn't have to come down on the east side to move over to the west to board the station platform, the train at the platform. So those are the kinds of things we're trying to do to condense the area into a smaller footprint, but provide actually more waiting space for folks and more open area, and get rid of all the little hidey holes in places that are frankly part of the problem right now. That's and open up the stairwell, and I mean just some things that just get rid of the places to hide.
And is our police force also doing a SEPTED analysis, or have you done those?
Yeah, we've already done those.
Okay.
We did those back in May.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, any other questions?
Adding to the SEPTED piece, actually, that Lisa and her team have been involved all through in fact, she's been to every public meeting on this, too.
Chair Kennedy, members of the board, just a quick security update about Watt and I-80. We have maintained security presence there since we talked about this back in May. Just to share the cost with you, between police officers and Paladin guards and transit agents, we've spent over $367,000 there since July. The PA was put put into place at Whatnot 80 and was operable in late 2017, so we've used that quite a bit. Right now, I have some police officers out at Whatnot 80, and I'm going to switch back to Paladin. So my plan is in March to switch back to a Paladin guard and a transit agent. And again, those hours are 6 a.m. to 12 a.m., and then we have 2 mobile Paladin guards that go through the system through the night, including closing of the gates there at Whatnot 80. We have, ever since we started working on this and did a SEPTED and took an adopt a station approach to this, the security team here at RTPS has attended the WAT PBID meeting, so we're in direct contact with the folks and how we can improve that station. We've received hundreds of Alert SAC RT tips. I kind of perused them in preparation for this, and it's just a multitude of things. We have our police observation device that's going to be installed next week out there at Whatnot 80, which will help us be a visual deterrent. And things are moving forward. I see an overall drop in violent crime for sure. Paladin stats, I've taken a hard look at their stats, and they've created over 600 calls of service there since July when they were placed out there. Like Mark said, unfortunately, there's quite a few lewd conduct calls, and we keep seeing the repeat type of calls, unfortunately, a lot of trespassers. But the fact that we own that station and maintain that presence, I do feel it's much safer for our riders.
Any others? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Good evening, Director Kennedy and members of the board. So the financial presentation we have today is going over the January results. So the net operating results were positive for January. There was more revenues than expenses by about $170,000. And year to date, that number is about approximately $2.3 million. From a budget to actual standpoint, there was 2 items that I wanted to point out. First of all, when you look at fares, they were actually in line with the budget, and we haven't seen that for the past few months. And the second thing that we saw is that salaries and fringe were above budget. This was expected because January is RT's highest payroll month. There's 2 holidays in the month of January. So those are the 2 things I wanted to point out. The next slide, before I go into this slide, at the last meeting when I went over the financial presentations, Director Chenier had asked for us to start looking at things a little bit differently, maybe coming up with some new benchmarking and statistics. So what I've typically done in this next slide is I've compared the fare revenues to the budget. Well, right now what we're doing is looking at fare revenues this year, or this month to last month of last year, and year to date as well, this year to last year. And you can actually see that fare revenues are down. There's a couple of reasons why there's probably many reasons why fare revenues are down, but the big ones are you're definitely seeing a change in ridership. We're seeing a change in buying patterns, and we're also seeing some free ride promotional activity. The one I want to talk about today is actually the shift in buying patterns, because that's something that's really been actually a positive thing for us. And what I mean by that is we've seen riders move away from the traditional prepaid fare, which is these paper prepaid tickets that you get 10 at a time or monthly pass, and they've moved to the electronic media, whether it's the mobile phone or the Connect card. And so what happens there is the good news, we didn't really lose that cash, rather we're actually building up a cash bank now. And so that's on this graph, what you see is from July of 2017 all the way up till January, you see we've built up a $471,000 deferred revenue bank. So that's money that typically would have been recognized in the past, but we're actually having to defer that for revenue recognition purposes. So that's accounting for some of that revenue loss. So that was something I really wanted to point out. I know I've been mentioning it at these meetings, but I think this really illustrates what's going on there. The next thing I want to talk about is those buying patterns. I know I just generally mentioned prepaid media. So I have 2
Patrick, could you go, I'm sorry, could you explain what that means?
Thank you.
Which did that for Linda.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, if you could
So
go
the
back on
deferred
the
revenue?
deferred revenue, is that
Okay.
people who have bought money
Yes.
into a Connect card
Okay,
but haven't
great.
spent it yet, or?
Yes. So this is where when you buy a Connect card, you have the option of putting stored value on the Connect card, so you could put $20 on that card. When you put the $20 on the card, I don't recognize the revenue because it's not a media anymore. So I have to put that into a deferred bank, and that can be used at a later point in time. The other thing that happens with the Connect card is the monthly pass. When I would sell a traditional pass that said for the month of February, and I'm selling it in January, I recognized it 1 month in advance because that's when I was selling it, and we had no way of recording when it was going to be used. So now with electronic media, I can actually sell a January pass that is going to be used in February, and I defer that revenue until February. So it's the combination of those two items.
So just to be clear, so at the end of January, we had customers walking around with $471,000 worth of fares in their pocket, basically.
Right,
But-
as opposed to prepaid tickets.
Right. And we're recognizing the revenue as they actually use that up.
Right, which is, and that what's great about that is it's a better match
got
of. Okay, sorry.
Good. Thank you.
Did you want?
But believe me, it makes perfect sense because I actually think I've got one ride on my phone that I haven't used yet.
Yeah, so you're in that
Okay, so
you're in that
I'm-
number right there.
Believe me, it's not 471.
Right, you're the yeah.
It's $2.50.
There you go.
Director Jennings.
So Brett,
Somebody needs to walk
Yes.
her out tonight.
just on that same subject, I think I get exactly what you're talking about. Have we, with electronic media, have we had it long enough to determine how long it takes for it to actually become real revenue? Is there any kind of pattern that we can see, whether it's a month, 2 months, 6
Yeah.
months, whatever?
That is a great question, and I don't have that answer right now. What I can say is, let me answer that with this next slide. So let me go into this. So in this next slide, what you're seeing is we haven't entirely moved over to electronic media. And so what I'm trying to say is about 20% of our customers have actually made that shift. And so that deferred revenue balance of $471,000, when we talk to our consultant on that does the Connect card, with only 20% of those people shifting, eventually we need to get all of those fare prepaid medias off the street because that saves us money by issuing tickets. I have to manage ticket stock, I have to manage inventory and so forth. So I want that off. I still want people to pay cash fares. That's totally a separate issue, but I don't want prepaid media that can get lost, stolen. It's a better mechanism to have a Connect card. So once people migrate over to this Connect card, you'll see that deferred revenue balance still grow. At 471, I anticipate this thing getting to probably around 800 to 1.2 million over time. And the reason why I say that and why I come up with that estimate is every year when we do a ticket exchange, we exchange about $700,000 to $800,000 of media. So that is my indicator that people are storing those tickets in their pocket and coming in and exchanging it for new media. So so again, I want to get to your answer. I don't have the data yet, but what we'll do is we'll look at that data and try to figure out as people are buying, how quickly are they using it? It's a good question. So I'll look at that a little bit further. Yep.
And then the add-on question to that is, how much are we losing by them not spending it at all? It's like the credit card, not the credit card, but the gift card that you get, and you don't actually use it. So how much revenue are we actually not realizing because they never use it at all?
Okay, so right in our Connect card rules, and actually Mr. Carter can probably even come up and assist me with this. We actually have a policy where after a certain point in time, if the card is not being used, it becomes in an inactive state, and that after a certain point in time, as the consortium, we can come up with a way of actually recognizing some of that revenue. Again, I don't have the exact specifics here with me, but I remember the exact language, and I don't know. And yeah, so we could bring that back with some of the parameters for what on how that works.
It also has a way for you to reinstate the revenue that you took off if somebody shows up later. You know, I moved and I came back, or I lost my card and I found it again. So it's actually very fair.
Right. It's customer friendly, but at the same time, you don't want a card that has $100 on it sitting out there till infinity. It allows, after a certain period of time, that we recognize an administrative portion of that. But again, like Mr. Carter said, if someone calls up and they're able to identify that card, we would refund them that money.
Director Chenier.
Thanks. I just want to follow up on the 471 number.
Sure.
Where do we recognize that in kind of budget documents?
That's a good question. So everything that we're showing, when I show this slide right here,
Right.
this is our profit. Well, in the
Right.
private sector, it's your profit and loss statement, right? We actually don't provide a balance sheet. And the balance sheet is where you have your cash and your liabilities. So this deferred revenue is considered a liability. So we're not showing it in the monthly financial statistics. We're just showing the profit and loss. We're not showing the balance sheet accounts. We're not showing the cash on hand, all of that activity. The reason why is because typically what you're doing in the profit and loss statement is showing how the business is operating. The balance sheet items are the items that you have your auditors come in and validate that the cash is there, that your liabilities are appropriate, and you're not. And that's probably one of the reasons why I started thinking about showing new statistics. How do I show you that there's information that is out there that could be helpful for us to use for future projections?
So I understand that, and I understand the balance sheet part, and that's where I would normally put that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit different it's a little bit. I don't want to go too far into this. Maybe we can have a discussion about
Sure.
it. But I just want to state it's a little bit different because you're not actually buying a good with that. You're buying a ride, and our marginal cost to provide that ride is very close to zero. It's de minimis. So I'm not sure that it should not go on these sheets and just stay on your balance sheet. But maybe it's a discussion we can have. I'd like to have us recognize that in a different way.
Okay. Well,
But I understand where you're going.
yeah, maybe I'll give you a little insight, and then we could still have the discussion. But we will have the issues that you have with this is if I have cash of a $20. So the Connect card's a regional card, and this could be cash on a YOLO card. It could be cash on all these various cards. So we have to be careful on how to recognize that revenue.
So that is a
So
liability
that's
if
part-
we're reimbursing
thing,
YOLO
yes,
or whatever.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
That makes sense.
All right.
Thanks.
Brent, I just wanted to clarify one thing. Aren't we required under modern accounting standards, though, not to recognize this revenue because of the type of fair media it is? I mean, isn't there essentially we can recognize that we have it, but it's deferred, and until it's used or it ages out, essentially under the policy that you referenced earlier,
Yes.
then we can't actually categorize it.
Right. You can't show it as revenue
Yeah.
until it's earned.
Exactly.
And that's
Yeah.
and that's the other part of the concept. That's the gas.
Post Enron, this is how we do accounting.
Correct.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Okay. I'll try to be brief, but these two slides are just showing, if you look at last year, January of 2017, as compared to January of 2018, the two big, the purple colors on this slide, it says FPP sales. FPP stands for fair prepayment, and in January of 2017, fair prepayment sales made up 60% of our revenue through that distribution channel. Now that's shrunk to 42%. And what you'll see is in 2017, we had no or very little, a sliver of Connect Card, like 1%, because that was our pilot, and now we're up to 15%. And so those are the things that we're seeing. On the cash fares, you actually saw cash fares go up, and that's because we actually started getting new machines with credit and debit. So cash fare is not just actual cash, but credit and debit as well. So those are some things that I wanted to point out. The next couple slides here, it's the fare box recovery slide that we always typically show. What we've done different in this slide is typically we compared this from budget to actual, but now what we're doing is we're showing it the fare box recovery system-wide, and then we're showing it with a bus and a rail. And what I'm doing today is just giving you the data. In the next couple board meetings, we're going to be actually going into some detail with some NTD, National Transit Database statistics on how we benchmark against other peers with the fare box recovery for bus and rail. On ridership, what you're going to see here is this slide hasn't changed. What you'll see is this is a budget to actual on our ridership. We're slightly below budget for the month of January. But what was interesting about the January information is that light rail is where we actually had the bigger decline. Actually, on the bus side, we saw bus go up about 4.7%. And that's a good thing that we're seeing. And some of the reason why we're seeing that is there was an extra, there's two components. There was one extra day during the week, midday, Monday through Friday, when comparing this year to last year. And then the other thing we're seeing is that the program that we had for the students, that's paying off. And so, and I want to bring those statistics back. We've been tracking them, but we've actually started seeing that there's a significant number of students that are buying more passes because we offered that discount. We're not going to necessarily see the revenues, and we knew that coming into that, but we're going to start seeing the ridership. So that's what this is. That bus ridership increase is what we're seeing. So that should conclude my presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks. I just want to say thank you. I mean, I want us to get to the right metrics so we know how we're doing and so that our staff actually knows what they're doing as far as moving the system forward. So I appreciate you kind of playing around with that.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right. That conclude? Yes. Okay. I do. Thank you very much. Sarah Kerber.
Hi, Sarah Kerber again with SAC True. We just want, our members participated in all of the WAD I-80 meetings that were held by Regional Transit and Walk Sacramento, and we wanted to thank Henry for his direction on this project and engaging more with members of the public and holding a wide variety of ways for the public to participate. We wanted to thank Kieran from Walk Sacramento for his leadership on this project, and we want to thank the Jameses for taking time out of their schedules to attend our meetings, to talk to our membership, to answer all of our questions that we had when we went to meetings. It was really a great experience that we haven't seen on a lot of other projects that have been done at Sacramento Regional Transit. And we felt that if public comment during these meetings is an issue, one of the ways we've been thinking about maybe giving the public more opportunities to participate is holding more opportunities to meet with members of staff like this. Like we had a meeting a couple of months ago where everyone was confused about the property sales. There was no community outreach done about that. Maybe if we had had some more information opportunities to participate, that could have answered a lot of people's questions outside of this space, in a space that was more productive, where members of the public could be heard and their opinions could be taken into the decision-making process, like what's been done with the Watt I-80 station. So we just want to thank you guys for really committing to this project. And we look forward to working with you on other projects.
Thank you. Rick Hodgkins. It's coming.
Sounds like a little bit of good news and bad news. First off, when it comes to the federal side of the revenue, Donald Trump, like most Republicans that I know, particularly Arnold Schwarzenegger, sees mass transit and public transit as a waste of money. It's no wonder why Republicans in Washington, D.C., including those in Congress and in the administration, want transit to be a private-public partnership where the federal government only chips in 20% and then the 80% comes from local and state funding sources. I don't think that's going to work, and I would agree with Director Hansen that a private-public partnership or a public-private partnership, whatever you want to call it, should not be the be-all, end-all for transit. Second, with regards to Watt and I-80, I would suggest that if replacing the elevators is not an option, I would just have what's going on at all the other different stations that share space with light rail, and that is to just have all the buses and trains at the same place rather than having people go upstairs. I don't live anywhere near Watt and I-80, but I will tell you more often than not the elevators have been out of service, and I'm always in a hurry to get somewhere. So most of the time I'll go to Matherfield and go from there. And then also with the revenue, I'm very happy that we're recognizing some revenue. Any revenue that is used on our system should be recognized. Remember, though, that some people use it on Roseville's transit system, as well as on YOLO Bus and maybe on E-Tran. I don't know about Placer County Transit, that goes up to Auburn, but then I'm wondering, if people are using the Connect card on those systems, perhaps the revenue ought to go to them. But anyone who uses a Connect card on our system, we need to recognize that revenue, because it's my understanding that the revenue from the fare box as well as from the Connect card can go back to our system to help provide services. So more on that when we get to the route optimization study. I am surprised that ridership is going down on light rail. That is my favorite part of our system. I do not like the buses, although I'm happy to see that ridership's going up. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeffrey Tardigia.
For the general manager's report, I would love to see included when you have delegated, when something is accomplished. I think that should be in the general manager's report. So, example, when you've done a piece of property, or when you've had another matter that has been delegated, like the matters you have delegated today, when they are completed. Also, as I've already reiterated, would love to see the pilot projects. Would love to see some concept of when our general manager has transit, communications on the first Friday of the month. Is there a subject matter that is, come up that is different? I've been to, and one of the things I hope on the I-80s that you get actual dollar numbers. When you came to the public, it was never explained how much any of the options that would cost. I've strongly from the beginning said, get rid of the east elevator. You have too many blind spots. There's other suggestions about that, and you will find apparently that about in April. But I don't see anything other than getting rid of the east elevator that you're going to ever remove the blind spots that are in that, in a sense, location. Financials. You need to understand what the Connect card, because I can put 3 months of monthly passes on the Connect card. That means you have over 3 months before it could be utilized. I hope that you understand that in the recognizing, but at the same time, also is know that the patterns are changing, because people do not look at for a normal, should we say, monthly bus pass. They look at that and say, well, wait a minute, I just want to use it daily. So patterns are changing, and this is where you're recognizing in part also where it means instead of riding 5 days a week, they may only be using light rail 2-3 days a week. So it's also impacting, changing the habits of your riders. I noticed you did the school pass, but you haven't offered the monthly pass. Hopefully this pilot project will produce good results, and that you will examine as whether that's another method. At the same time, though, I will say, as much as Brett wants to get rid of that, shall we say, paper pass, it's never been explained to me why revenue return is $1.20 and cash is $2.50. That's why people buy paper passes.
Thank you, Russell Rollins.
Good evening, Chair Kennedy and members of the board. Thank you for the wonderful presentation on the Watton 80 project. I really commend the staff and everyone involved for pushing for such a dynamic and engaging process on this project. I would just like to reiterate the importance of keeping the station whole. I think that it was kind of quickly breezed over in that presentation. There was a bold section that that closing the station disproportionately affects low income and ARC students, two populations that I think are very important. It's also very important to know that there is a Mercy housing development that will be opening right near the Watna 80 station. So these are all things I think that are very, very, very important. I don't think that this should be boiled down to an elevator being too expensive. I think that an elevator keeps a system whole. That's just my personal experience, and I would hope that each and every one of you would spend some time at the station. It sounded a little troubling about the cleaning situation. I'm not exactly sure what a full cleaning of a station twice a day looks like, but I'm just curious to go check that out for myself, and I may spend some time doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's all the cards we have.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Director Cerna.
Thank you. I just I had a question for Henry based on something important that I think Russell just touched on, and that's the courtyard project that the county is currently working on with SHRA, the conversion to hotel that's just to the north of I-80 there, probably less than 1/8 of a mile from the top of the Wat I-80 station. To what extent, I see Mark approaching, maybe he has the answer.
Mark, I'm going to answer this question.
To what extent is RT coordinating with our planning staff at the county in terms of whatever changes may happen from a programmatic standpoint or a capital facility standpoint at the station relative to the fact that you're going to likely have even greater demand at that station once this project is occupied?
Yes, we actually we have got lots of this type of comment and input. One you just talked about, and after considering all this input, we are leaning towards not to relocate this. We're going to keep that and trying to find a way to improve the current condition of the current location.
Okay, so I'm hearing loud and clear that you're walking lockstep with county planning staff. That's what I'd like to hear.
We'll work with them together.
Okay,
yes.
all right.
That's a huge beneficial improvement
Yeah.
in the area, so absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? Thank you.
Next item, item number 11, resolution commending Andrew J. Moran. And I want to remind the board you do need a motion and a second to approve this resolution. But we'd also like to move the podium with Chair Kennedy and Director Moran to make the presentation.
Second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Director Jennings and a second by Director Budge. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
Motion carries at 100%. So, gentlemen, if you'd meet me at the podium, please. I know, but you're just brighter than mine.
Thank you very much, Cindy, and to the board. First of all, I want to thank Andy. I'm going to read a few of these whereases, but I'm not going to read the whole thing, if that's okay, because I can't do it in 3 minutes. But we do now know that Andy's middle initial is J. So whereas Andrew J. Moran faithfully represented the city of Folsom on the Regional Transit District Board of Directors from December 2006, and whereas Andrew J. Moran served as chair of the Regional Transit Board of Directors in 2017, and whereas during Andrew J. Moran's term as chair of the Board of Directors for 2017, Sacramento Regional Transit received over $41 million in transportation. Is that a million? Yeah, it's a lot. In transportation congestion relief funds, improved SAC RT's financial condition by enhancing revenues and controlling costs, resulting in an in an operating surplus of $2.1 million for fiscal year 2017, strengthened and encouraged the number of public-private partnerships, renovated the 16th Street Light Rail Station, launched SAC-RT's mobile fare application, Zip Pass. Director Budge is particularly fond of the Zip Pass. Installed a two-way public address system in light rail stations, proceeded with the first steps to complete a route optimization study, whereas serving as chair of the board of directors, Andrew J. Morin, demonstrated dedication and commitment to service on behalf of the residents of Sacramento, encouraging full participation in the discussion of all issues in an expeditious manner. Therefore, be it hereby resolved as follows, that the board of directors does hereby express its appreciation and the appreciation of the entire staff of Regional Transit to Andrew J. Morin for his year of service as chair of the board of directors, and look forward to his continued service on the board. Let me say from a personal perspective that I was very fortunate in that I came on the board and immediately became vice chair, and got to do it under someone who has, so much knowledge and experience on this board. You made my life easier, I think, in the coming year, but I learned a great deal from you from a transit perspective, but more importantly, I was always in awe of watching you conduct the meetings with great class, fairness, even keel, no matter what the issue or how many people we were talking with. And so I give you, great credit, and I appreciate and learned a great deal from you. So congratulations.
Well, yeah, thank you very much for all the kind compliments there. As we know, it's a massive team that does all this work. And so first of all, just thank you to the 1,000 or so men and women who work for Sacramento Regional Transit. I mean, that's a lot of folks doing a lot of heavy lifting and making great progress with what we would all like to see is more resources than we have. So that's first and foremost. Secondly, serving as chair for a year, I have even a greater appreciation for all those who've served as chair. It is a lot of work, specifically Chair Chenier, who did it for 2 years. So I believe Patrick is already politicking to do it for 2 years. So well, we will have a Patrick 2 years in a row, though. That's guaranteed. Lastly, though, it is a sincere privilege of mine to serve with everyone on this board. The heart and soul that you folks possess, and I just feel it every day, trying to make Sacramento Regional Transit the very best it can be. And there is a lot of dedication sitting up there on that dais, and it means a lot to me to serve with you. But just as importantly, and I feel this sincerely, is your home jurisdictions are very lucky to have you as well. I see the integrity served here, and I know that is a function of what you do in your home jurisdiction. So Citrus Heights, City of Sacramento.
Andy, could you
Elk
repeat
Grove.
that last part slower and more clearly, please?
Yes, in Rancho Cordova, the representation here from the County Board of Supervisors, it makes me feel darn good to live in this region. So thank you very much, everyone.
I just have my 3 minutes?
Yes.
Okay.
Hang on, guys. Set the clock for 2 minutes, please.
Okay, 2 minutes. Actually, I just have 2 minutes. Immediate past chair Morin, and on behalf of the entire SAC-RT employees, over 1,000 union and non-union employees, and lots of community stakeholders, we were truly blessed to have your leadership and vision governing our board in 2017, and we're even more grateful for your sacrifice and dedication to address SAC-RT's pension issue, and which is one of the most critical issues facing SAC-RT in last 15 years. Well, you have been serving as the chair of 5 pension boards, which they have the equal power as this board. it's very strange, role here. In last 6 years, you have been serving as the chair of these 5 pension boards, and we see you as one of the most visionary, considerate, strong, but humble leaders we have ever met. And you care deeply about this community, our employees, hundreds of thousands of riders, and our public transit system in this region. We will remember you time for your thoughtfulness, fair and firm leadership style, and we will remember you your best for your ability to build a consensus and identify common ground that benefits all parties in this highly dynamic, complicated, aggressive, and diverse community. And also, you're a frequent Sacramento rider, so you can give us your first-hand experience, and so we can further enhance our system in a timely fashion. And thank you, Sacramento and the whole community are forever grateful for your leadership.
Thank you very much. I still admit I use the paper tickets, so you don't have any of my money right now, okay?
Next item number 12, new business. Surplus property along the Walnut Grove branch line of the Southern Pacific Railroad. In front of you is Resolution A, delegating authority to the general manager CEO to enter into a joint development agreement with the city of Sacramento for the transfer of the Walnut Grove branch, or Resolution B, delegating authority to the general manager CEO to dispose of the Walnut Grove branch through marketing to a single or multiple buyers, or Motion C, authorizing the use of operating funds to pay ongoing maintenance costs and begin addressing existing encroachments. And here to present is Brent Berniker.
So good evening again. So on December 11th, 2017, staff brought a letter of interest by the City of Sacramento for the land located at the old Walnut Grove branch line. The project is proposed as a bike and walking trail that will provide mobility for residents in the surrounding areas. After the presentation, staff was asked to bring an action to the board with some options to consider. So what we've done is we've provided those 3 options that Cindy had just mentioned. I'll discuss those in just a few minutes. The issue paper that we've put together has provided a lot of detail on this. I am just going to cover the salient points. So, and the first point I want to point out was the land was purchased back in 1984 with state and local capital funds. The intent of the land purchase was to provide a potential alignment for the now existing blue line. Since a new, different alignment was chosen, this land is no longer needed for its intended use. And then the fourth point I want to point out is a determination was made when we made that different alignment change. The interest in the land, we don't have a current project or a future project that land is could be used for. So now we have 3 options to consider. The first is delegating the authority to the GM to enter into a joint development agreement with the City of Sacramento to transfer the land. The second option would be delegating authority to the GM to dispose of the land through marketing to a single buyer or multiple buyers. And the third option is more or less holding steady with some additional tasks, which is hold on to the land, pay the ongoing maintenance costs, but also address the existing encroachments and carry some more liability associated with holding the land. There's a lot of pros and cons with these 3 options. So I'm going to start with the first option, which is the joint development with the City of Sacramento. The city of Sacramento would be making significant improvements to this land and making it an official trail. This is going to open and improved access by having a paved trail with some waypoints directing users to various bus stops nearby, which aligns with RT's mission of stimulating transit usage by providing first and last mile benefits for our riders. Another benefit of the transfer is that RT would save in operating funds and reduce its overall liability risk. The transfer would immediately relieve operating costs of about $35,000 a year. And actually, we're getting a discount when we pay that because we're using a work program. If we had gone out and we actually do more work and we have to use a private sector, it's going to triple that cost. In addition to that, the estimated cost of removing the encroachments on the trail is going to range between about $460,000 and $925,000. By allowing the city of Sacramento to own the land, RT would not be responsible for any environmental mitigation. And this is actually a big pro, because if we look to sell that, that would be something that we would have to take on. The land was previously owned by Southern Pacific Railroad, and railroad land is typically known to have environmental remediation needs. And then finally, what we did is we added something which we call kind of a clawback, where if within 10 years the city would not be able to develop this land for its intended use, that would actually revert back to Sacramento. So one of the big con there would be, we would not be able to receive a monetary value for the land. Whereas in the second option, there's a possibility that we could sell the land to one or multiple parties and potentially receive value. Considering that the cost is significant to prepare the land for the sale, you have staff's time, legal assistance, environmental work, encroachment costs. These costs could definitely outweigh any benefits. And then also we would need to find a marketable buyer interested in paying a high enough value to offset these costs. Based on the layout of the land, it's difficult and time-consuming to find an interested party, to find someone that's interested in also providing that transit element. Under the third option, RT would continue to maintain the land. The con in this option is that it would be costly, and I've mentioned those. We have no intended use for the land. Improvements are definitely needed. I've walked the trail. Eric, our real estate manager, and I have gone on the trail. It could use some work. And so any more money spent on this trail would use up operating dollars that's much needed for other strategic initiatives. So with this information, with the staff report, right now staff is seeking direction from the board. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Director Chenier.
Yeah.
We do. You want to public comment? Okay, sure. Not a problem. We do have quite a bit of public comment, so I'm going to invoke the prerogative bestowed upon me earlier, and we're going to have 2-minute speaking time per person. Brian Backhouse.
Good evening. I'm Brian Backus, and my wife and I, we live in Southland Park neighborhood. In fact, the railroad track is right behind us. Yeah, we moved there about 15 years ago, and it's always been a nice area back there. People do their running, do their jogging with their dogs and so forth, and they have to go over the trails. It's a little weedy back there, so I think this added benefit of establishing a trail would definitely benefit the neighborhood, would benefit the community, Sacramento overall. The current state, obviously, if you ever walked it, it is, in disrepair. It can really use some work. One of the benefits I see that is happening right now, even before it's even being built, is we're getting community involvement. We're getting people out picking up trash, on Saturday mornings. We're getting people out there, connecting with everybody. Bottom line is, in my mind's eye, I can see myself, with my wife and my dog, jogging or walking, probably walking. But, on a Saturday morning or a Sunday night, and taking your dog out there and connecting with your neighbors and enjoying the landscape and having a great time. I mean, it's one thing to, have people in their houses all the time looking at their computers or gadgets, and I think it's, time to put that stuff down and get out and meet and walk and get out and enjoy the air. So I, definitely would like to have you guys, vote for one of these amendments or whatever you guys are doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Brian Ebert.
All right, it's the Brian Show. I'm Brian Ebert. I'm the president of the Southland Park Neighborhood Association, an area encompassing about 14,000 residents south of the zoo and north of Florin Road. This is a very exciting night for trail enthusiasts in Sacramento. I think back to the fall of 2013 when our neighborhood first learned that the state was quietly about to approve a plan to run tourist trains south of the zoo on what we call our neighborhood greenbelt, and how a few neighbors met around a kitchen table and decided to derail that plan, pun intended, by simply educating the public with facts. But our community also decided we would not be NIMBYs and embraced a plan to convert the corridor to a bike and pedestrian trail that everyone could utilize and enjoy. The Del Rio Trail Project has a broad range of support, from kids wanting safe routes to school to residents that want safe routes to businesses, city parks, and to work. And the long list of supporters includes several neighborhood associations, nonprofits, council members, Congress member Matsui, and importantly, Senator Penn and Assemblymember Cooper have issued letters supporting the trail and opposing rail traffic on this corridor. Now, the Southland Park Neighborhood Association did not oppose the extension of excursion trains from Old Sacramento to the zoo, and that segment was approved by the State Parks and Recreation Commission. But if anyone tells you that it's a great idea to have heavy locomotives running next to the trail south of the zoo, keep in mind that after much discussion and public input, the State Parks and Recreation Commission voted to kill that train plan back in June of 2014 with the help of then Senator Steinberg and hundreds of residents. I'm not going to rehash the multitude of reasons why a trail with a rail is a bad idea in this area, but this train-free trail has tremendous support, whereas the locomotive plan has widespread and deep opposition, and I encourage you to support this rail-to-trail plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Eric Banger.
Well, you know, some people like trains, but one thing that I noticed is you're still calling this the Sacramento Southern branch of something. This is what we're talking about tearing up, is the Sacramento Southern Railroad's main line. It's 16 miles long, and they want to tear up a 4-mile section in the middle of it, of the Sacramento Southern Railroad's main line. I hope, I guess I got to direct it to the chairman, but I would hope that you would include in your discussions the Sacramento Railroad Museum Foundation. There's Greg Lukenbild over there. He's one of the people in it. And I would hope that you would include the museum in the discussions you're having with the city. If you don't, today is going to be a very sad day for heritage railroading. It looks to me like the city is hijacking a rail corridor so they can destroy it. Future generations will not view you well if you do this. I hope RT takes a more pro-rail attitude. After all, you guys have trains, right? You want people to like trains. So if you have the Sacramento Railroad Museum in good stead with you and be nice to them, more people will ride your trains probably.
Thank you, sir. Robin Netzer.
Good evening. I'm Robin Netzer. I live in Southland Park. I back up to the train tracks, and I am absolutely, positively, 100% engaged in promoting the Del Rio Trail project. It benefits everybody, from children to adults. My husband is disabled. For the first time, he'll be able to leave the house, get around the loop on Normandy, Del Rio Road, and Ridgeway, and actually get to a trail accessible to him in his wheelchair. This is a very exciting idea. The idea that the kids that are walking to Sutter Elementary School and high school students from the South area can bike all the way to City College. It's amazing. That's all people. But on the macro level, you've got the poetic synthesis of enabling the environment to heal and including all the pollinators and all the people working in a large park-like setting. Yes, we have the river, and yes, we have trails along the river, and yes, we have beautiful open lands, but this will only benefit all of that and make it more of a vibrant, true city. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeffrey Tartagia.
Well, I'm here in hopes that the city is going to take over because, if I understand correctly, this is some 90 to 150 feet wide through here. And I saw and wish we'd had a presentation of drawing exactly where this was located at. It has been a presentation available someplace because I've seen dealing with this trail available through here. It's a shame that RT doesn't get to see the benefit of what this is being talked about. But my other mention is how many RT bus stop locations are available with regards to this trail.
Hey, Chuck Hughes.
Hi, Chuck Hughes. I'm the Del Rio Trail Committee Chairman within the Southland Park Neighborhood Association. Just wanted to come today and extend a sincere thank you to the RT board and to staff. It was clear reading through the issue paper that they put some time into thinking about this, and then it's been pursued since the last time this was before the board. The Del Rio Trail project has a lot of support in the neighborhood. A couple of years ago, SLPNA did a poll, and the support was around 80% in our neighborhood. So, you know, it's not often, I'm sure you're all elected folks, not too often you get to 80%. I got involved in the trail project because my house backs up to this corridor. And when I bought the house, I noticed that it was on the Sacramento City Bike Trail Master Plan, and was really excited that someday, hopefully, this would actually become a bike trail that connected to the Sacramento River Trail, and so you could access the American River Parkway through this corridor, which, if this gets built, you'll be able to do. So I'm really excited about it. I've got a 4-year-old who's really excited about it. I have yet to meet someone in my neighborhood who has young children who isn't in favor of this project. I've heard at the couple of meetings I've been here for RT now that you guys are doing route optimization. I read through the issue paper and saw some discussion about bus stops and particularly the east-west corridors. The Del Rio Trail project is primarily north-south, crosses a lot of main roads going east-west, Fruit Ridge, Florin, Meadowview. So it seems to me, and I know that they're doing some stub outs in the design into some of these streets, it seems to me that that's a perfect spot for bus stops and people coming from their houses to go north-south on the corridor and then to pick up a bus going east-west on some of those main roads. So you might think about that in your route optimization, although I'm not familiar with that. Anyway, I'd like to encourage RT to enter the joint development agreement with the city. It removes RT of the maintenance costs and the liability of this corridor for land that RT isn't using and doesn't plan to use, and it supports RT access points and ridership. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Scott Burns.
Thank you. I'm Scott Burns, resident of Southland Park for 17 years, also a member of the Board of Directors of Southland Park Neighborhood Association. And just as a side note, I spent 17 years as an attorney for the Department of Transportation, and part of my job was dealing with abandoned property converted to trails and public liability for that. So let me just start off by saying that your option C is a dead bang loser. You either want to transfer this property to the city or you want to sell it off. I'm here to say in support of the joint development agreement, strongly in support. Not only for the reasons that have already been stated, but this is an opportunity to participate with the city in developing a project that will greatly enhance the health and welfare of everyone in this city. I don't know if you've been to Poughkeepsie to walk across the bridge across the Hudson, if you've been to New York walking the High Line, if you've been into Texas walking some of the old pedestrian rails that have been converted to trails there. Everywhere they've been built, they've been a great success. And this particular one is particularly advantageous because it is rare to find something as long as a 4.5-mile segment where you not only can let people be able to get out into a safe spot and walk a trail or bicycle, but actually to be able to do it and get their 10,000 steps in. I mean, most of these things are a few hundred yards long. As has already been said, it's strongly supported by the neighborhood. I am aware of some issues of people that support the trains and the history of that segment, Frankly, preserving the history is something that should be built into this project, and that's an issue that the city will be dealing with, and there'll be plenty of opportunity for public input once the city starts that process. Thank you.
Thank you. Is dead bang loser a legal theory?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, thank you very much. Director Chenier. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chair Kennedy. So a couple thank yous, first of all, to Brent and the staff for working. You're okay. You know, just saying thank you. That was quick. For working on this and working in tandem with the city, and I see a number of city staff back as well, Jesse and others who've been working on this project for quite a while. We got a $2.2 million planning grant that has really put forward where we're going with this project, and I think completing or nearing completion of the actual planning. So this is the next step in making this a reality. I also want to give my thanks and respect to the Southland Park Neighborhood Association. I think the board and other members of the association, and Chuck especially, have done a tremendous job pushing this project forward and really taking ownership of their neighborhood and ownership of the project itself. I've been to, I think, almost all of the meetings that have happened in the neighborhood around this project, and I can vouch that there is very, very, very good support for it in the neighborhood. There are a few individuals up around Sutterville who are not, and we'll try to work with them as well. I think this is, again, a great project. I think for the land was bought by RT for a specific reason, which no longer exists. We do have a liability of 25 to 30,000, which is the small part. I think the larger liability, if we were ever to do anything about it, is the encroachment. And Mr. Jennings knows well what it's like to deal with people who have encroached on bike trails or potential bike trails. So we need to, I think, let RT focus on the things it does well, which is running a transportation system, and not worry about a 4.5 mile length piece of land that really has no value to anyone else besides the community in building a bike ped trail. I've ridden on those trails in many states. I think they are always very, very successful. There is generally some opposition when you start, but once it's up and running, people are keeping it clean. We also have a homeless problem on the trail as we speak, but having more people use the trail on their bikes, walking, will help that as well. So I am very, very much in favor of this. Again, I want to thank the staff. I want to thank Southland Park Neighborhood Organization. I want to move item 12 and option A as we move forward. Thank you.
Okay, moved by Director Chenier, second by Vice Chair Hansen. I believe Vice Chair Hansen has a comment.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for the presentation, Brent. I think it did lay out our various permutations. But what I really want to say is, coming from a railroading family, I understand some of the issues that maybe Greg, who didn't speak, would think about. Because it does have a sort of sense of loss. But what I want to refocus us on is the idea that this was going to be a light rail line when it was originally purchased. And what we're contemplating now is something a little bit different, but the light rail line wouldn't necessarily have preserved the railroading tradition. But this does allow us to incorporate the history, as one of the commenters said, into the trail. And these Rails to Trails projects all over the country have been amazing community assets, not only for the public recreation that was mentioned, but especially because they allow us to incorporate these historic paths. And Sacramento, as a railroad city, allow us to incorporate those areas that otherwise would be off limits to people and integrate them into the communities around. So Brian and the other Brians from Southland Park, and all the other non-Brians who spoke, I think did a really good job talking about why this is a huge benefit for the neighborhood. But I think as a city, as we try to grow these opportunities, certainly the American River Trail is part of the jewel of our region, and that system goes east-west. The opportunity to go north-south here, connecting potentially at some point down to Elk Grove and up, also gets people off of the freeway, off of I-5, and allows for that commuting pattern, which is one of the things that wasn't necessarily talked about. We did talk about the schools, but I think people are now biking in from Folsom to downtown for work. They may bike from Elk Grove into downtown. It's not that much further
it's actually probably less far, but Andy is our resident and expert on Folsom to downtown. So I just want to say this is a great project. It certainly is something that I think will build the community, and it's an important thing for RT not to cling to these sites that don't really serve the community and return them to a positive community use. That's what this does. And I want to thank Director Chenier in this setting for his leadership on this project and for the community as a champion, really, of something great.
Director Harris?
Thank you, Chair. Right over the years, just doing the math, we spent almost $1 million cutting weeds in this piece of property since it was purchased. That's a pretty significant investment to sit on a piece of property that really doesn't serve the needs of RT and hasn't since the alignment of the blue line changed direction. This use sort of furthers a lot of the initiatives of the city of Sacramento to lower vehicle miles traveled and create alternative mobility modes. And I think it'll be highly embraced over the years. I'm working on a segment of the Two Rivers Trail, and our vision has been in the American River Parkway plan for many years to create a safe and efficient pathway to get from Folsom to downtown Sacramento, and with the Sacramento River Bikeway to carry that down to Freeport. And this is a nice piece that just really interlocks with those kind of initiatives. So I'm definitely in support, and I also thank Mr. Chenier for his work on this. It's been a lot, but this is definitely a very good use for this piece of property.
Director Natoli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question about, certainly I haven't tracked this particular project all that closely, but for the portion that goes from Freeport all the way to Hood that the state purchased, I have to represent that on the Board of Supervisors, that area. I'm curious, what has the state indicated they're going to do if this portion is getting over to the city for a trail, because they anticipated, again, I understand the opposition to the rail portion of that, but that's what they purchased it for a long time ago, and then RT obviously had it for light rail, not precluding the potential use that you could have excursion rail in that same corridor. So I guess I'm curious, what's the state indicated they're going to do with the portion that goes south? Not that that's our concern at RT, but it is my concern, certainly from the standpoint that they've got this stranded property, potentially, or they may put it into a trail, which may or may not sit well with farmers that are further south, but...
We're still analyzing that, what we're going to do in the future. And
well, we don't own beyond that, but has the state, Henry, said in all this process what they intend to do with that portion since they ruled out?
We don't know. We don't know what state.
So they're going to take a stranded piece of property that, again, has trestles and other things in it.
The rail plan that they adopted, but I don't
Yeah.
remember what it was.
Okay.
I can't hear what's been said.
I think, so I also remember slightly, but I think they're going to use it for maintenance run for trains. And there's
It's
a
in the
yard
state
down-
rail plan that was referenced earlier. It was State Parks rail plan, but I think that it was
How
just
did they
for a
get there?
smaller excursion train,
Yeah.
but I don't know.
Where would they take off from? Freeport?
Yeah, Freeport.
How'd they get the train there?
Magic?
That's what I'm thinking, Steve.
You'll have to ask State Parks about that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other questions? Director Miller.
Big supporter of trains, but also a supporter of this trail project. The one thing that stood out in the staff report, I want to make sure we paid attention to, is about some of the areas with frontage along 35th, Freeport, Florin, and Meadowview. Should they be suitable for sale and development, it reads here that the city has agreed to allow SAC-RT to receive the net sale proceeds, and I want to make sure that gets into the agreement, and I'll support it.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, I just want to, as I too represent this area on the board, and want to thank Director Chenier for his work and Southland Park neighbors. This has really been something to come together, and it's, I think, going to be a huge benefit to the area. So, thank you for all your work. And with that, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain.
Motion carries at 100 votes. Next item number 13, information. Jackson Corridor Transit Funding Property-Based Funding Program, introduced by Laura Ham.
Bless you.
Good evening. I would like to introduce James Drake, our principal planner from the RT Planning Department, to present this item.
Cindy, we have very few comments on this, so we can go back to the 3 minutes on.
Good evening. The subject of tonight's item is the potential creation of one or more funding districts to cover the costs of transit and major new development areas in the county. And this is an informational item, and the objective tonight is really just to provide some background and a high-level overview to kind of set the stage for action later this year and begin the feedback process from the board and the public. Before I continue, I'd like to recognize a couple key contributors. First, here is Mr. Todd Smith with Sacramento County, who Todd is the lead planner on, and really is the one kind of implementing the county general plan on these projects, and that's really kind of the genesis of tonight's item. Like any public utility, transit faces a lot of challenges serving new areas, and what the general plan really does is it kind of puts transit on a sustainable financial footing. It basically requires, or at least heavily incentivizes, the funding of transit in new areas, and that's a big thing. And the second is Mr. Angelo G. Tsakopoulos and Mr. Jim Wiley, who's on the project team for Jackson Township. And under the general plan, there really is not a requirement that that RT be the provider of that transit service. And what Angelo basically said is, if we're going to do this, let's do this right. Let's make this an RT bus integrated with the RT schedules and operations. And let's make this have a transit pass so that's good on the entire RT system so people will actually use this. And that's basically when we began discussing how RT could be directly integrated into this project. To give a sense of where we're talking about, the Jackson Highway Corridor is located south of Rancho Cordova, east of Watt Avenue. Right now it's mostly industrial and agricultural uses, but the plan is for this to eventually become a community of about 68,000 people, which is basically another Rancho Cordova, another Folsom. From upper left to lower right, there are 4 major projects here known as West Jackson, Jackson Township, Mather South, and Newbridge. The shaded area of this chart really just illustrates how transit service and transit costs would grow over time from initially just a transit pass program with no service to ultimately having 15-minute headways at peak and having 30-minute headways off peak. And it's that 15-minute headway, that's what gets you the most points under the general plan, and that's really what the applicants want. The top line kind of shows how program revenues would grow over time, both from inflation and as more and more parcels in the developments are built out. This pie chart basically shows the breakdown of costs, and what this is really showing is that this funding program would cover not only operations, but the capital, paratransit, customer service, and even the opportunity costs of the Transit Pass program. And the chart on the right of the revenues, what this shows really is a contribution of RT revenues. These are revenues that we think will actually grow with the population. Most of our revenues are more or less fixed. New development doesn't mean new revenues, but there are some that grow with population. This represents something we think is reasonable to do, or actually that it might not be reasonable not to include that contribution to the project.
Actually, James, just 1 second here. That 12% RT state local funding actually is our projection about the sales tax funding from that particular area, because more people will be there. So the sales tax revenue or whatever come from that particular corridor area, we will give back to that corridor. So it's really not RT's money, it's actually the money come from that place, yeah.
So how do we make this all happen? In terms of next steps, Basically, our next steps will be developing one or more agreements with the county that would basically describe the service plan, the costs, terms and conditions for passing these funds from the county to RT for the service. One of the guiding principles we've kind of had is we'd like to make transit unified with RT. We'd like to keep the financial piece unified with the county. We don't do development approvals. We don't do infrastructure finance on a daily basis, special elections. These are things where we don't have a lot of personal expertise, but the county does this every day, and we don't want to fragment their system on the financial side, but the service delivery side, we would like very much to become seamless. We'd like this to be RT service with an RT pass. So over the next few months and going into the summer, we look forward to coming back to you all with details and updates, and ultimately with some action to take.
Thank you. We have one member of the public, Rick Hodgkins.
Thank you. While I do not live anywhere along this particular corridor, I will tell you that there is one, I think only one bus that serves a portion of that corridor, and that bus goes from Watt and Manlove to, I believe, Butterfield and Matherfield, and goes out as far as Watt and Kiefer, or Sunrise and Kiefer, whichever that is. You know, just like I said during the general manager's report, the vast majority of people that live out there are not Democrats. They're the opposite party and don't really care much about transit. They think it's a waste of money, but that for those who do care, that those that cannot drive, we need to do this. We're just starting to build Township 9, so let's go against the conservative party's wishes and start doing transit out in this area. My only concern is, why would you give everybody a pass without there being any service? That seems like you're putting the cart before the horse. So I support it. Again, I just wanted to know why you would be giving people a pass, but then not giving them access. It's kind of like with the Medi-Cal program. We give you a benefits, a BIC card, but you have little to absolutely no access. And you might have people that don't drive that want to go to an event or a game at Golden One Center. How are they going to get home back to where they live? I mean, yes, light rail's extended, but not bus routes. And I'll discuss that more when we get to route optimization. So thank you.
Brief response.
Yeah, I can respond to the issue on the Transit Pass program. The way it's been envisioned is that in the early years of the development, in the first few years, there might not be enough units built to support transit service, but that a good way to kind of start things off would be to have a Transit Pass program that people could use, and they could drive into the light rail station at Watt and Manlove and ride the system there. And then once we get to about 20% built out, that's when we'd start running like peak-only commuter service.
All right, Director Natoli.
Yeah, just very briefly, I certainly want to thank RT and certainly Todd and the landowners. Obviously, we're represented here this evening, but others that they've been working with in the corridor. I guess I would just say to Rick's point a moment ago, I don't think this is about party affiliations or political leanings. It's about good, sensible land use planning, and I think that was part of your point, Rick, is that the idea here is to have a sure funding base for the public transportation option for folks that would live and move in and work in these newly developed areas. These land use entitlements are still pending, obviously in the process, still undergoing environmental review, or will be subject to a number of hearings before the Board of Supervisors and other entities as it comes through the process. But I think that what we're talking about here is trying to build upon what we've already got in place in some other areas of the unincorporated area with CSA 10, which is a county service area that has some transit support built into it. More recently, the Cordova Hills project that contemplated certain aspects, but certainly not to the level that prescribed that regional transit be the provider. It will allow for other options in that particular development, at least as it's currently constructed. So I think this is a move in the right direction. It sort of goes to the unification, I think, of services and service models, and whether it be shuttles or buses or trains or other modes. And I think it's an approach that obviously merits our certainly further discussion and work both at the county level with the property owners and other interested parties, and certainly with regional transit.
Director Budge.
Okay, so my comment would be that the city of Rancho Cordova actually goes all the way down to the Jackson Highway and is contiguous to this area to the east. And so we have a lot of people who live there already who are begging for transit service, and they have nothing except the Cordovan that only runs on a commute schedule, and we're very pleased to have that, but it's not adequate. And so given the fact that we now have we're going to have ultimately contiguous land uses, it only makes sense, especially with route optimization, that we figure out how to combine service down Sunrise with the service that would be needed along the Jackson corridor. It's an opportunity.
Understood, yes.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right. Is there a motion?
No, it's an
Information item, yes it is. Thank you. I will say, we met on this quite a while ago, and it's really exciting. I mean, this is really raising the bar. I mean, this, it's an information item at the end of a fairly long meeting, but I mean, this is something of national impact and import. So, really well done, you guys. So, all right.
Next item number 14, information, route optimization presentation by Jarrett Walker Associates, introduced by Laura Ham.
Good evening again. So at the end of last year, you approved our contract with Jarrett Walker and Associates to rethink the purpose and design of the SAC-RT transit network. We've talked a lot about this big review and its goals, and we're very glad to be getting to work. We've also talked about the project as the route optimization study, and it's been mentioned a few times tonight. But it's much more than optimizing existing routes. So therefore, we are working on a new name for the public planning process. A few names have been tossed around and debated even this evening. Our working title right now is SAC-RT Forward. We're also considering SAC-RT Forward, a new network, and we would appreciate your input on the title of the project, anything that might jump out at you. So since we issued the notice to proceed in mid-January, we've provided our team with a lot of data about the system and the region. We've begun work on a public involvement plan that will detail our extensive outreach efforts, and we're also working hard to nail down the timelines of our project milestones. So tonight, Michelle Poirot of Jarrett Walker and Associates is here to give you an introductory presentation about the effort, and welcome to Michelle.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. I am a principal with Jarrett Walker and Associates, and I want to tell you a little bit about my firm before I start. Jarrett Walker and Associates is a transit planning firm, but we particularly specialize in network planning. So we will not engineer you a light rail line, and we cannot tell you exactly which fare media is the right fare, paper for your fare machines, but we are specialists in helping you figure out the very tricky puzzle of how to cover a space with a bunch of lines. This is a basic geometric puzzle that benefits from some skill. It also involves really substantial community conversations, often very difficult conversations, and that is an area that we specialize in as well, helping you understand your choices and then make resilient decisions that last many, many years into the future. We're also very good at IT. Let's see if this will come back on. So I'd like to introduce a woman standing behind me who's named Nicole Porter. Please wave. She's with AIM Consulting. AIM is a subcontractor. They are helping us with public involvement and public consultation. So some of the people in the room and many of you will hear from her and her colleague Gladys Cornell from time to time. I suppose I could also introduce my mother, Julia, who's just come to keep me company tonight. It's very kind of her. I'm from Los Angeles, so this was a nice place for us to meet in between. All right. So I want to give you a little overview of the timeline of this project. We are right at the beginning, okay? So we are in February, March. We, at our office, are working hard analyzing the existing conditions of your system. And when we're done doing that, we are going to give you and give the public something we call a choices report. And the choices report is going to tell you not only how is your system performing, but also what key and difficult choices are raised by the current performance of your system. So this presentation I'm doing right now is really kind of extra credit. It wasn't even in the plan. It's not in the timeline. We just like to work with boards so much, and we think that your understanding is so important that I ask to come down early in our process. So we don't even have a project website yet. This is really sort of a pre-briefing for you, the board. So at the beginning of April, we will publish that choices report. Please look forward to it. And then we will consult the public and key stakeholders, and again, you, in April and May. And in June through September, we are going to go off and do some technical work designing future transit alternatives for your system. We'll do that work with your staff. And then you'll hear from us again in the fall, October and November probably. We'll consult the public and stakeholders again, and you on future alternatives for the SAC-RT network. The really difficult time for you will probably be next winter, December through February. We are going to come to you and ask you for policy guidance. And when you give us that guidance, you may have to make a really difficult trade-off. So all of this whole process and me being here tonight is all getting you ready for a potentially difficult decision, difficult trade-off that I think will happen next winter. This is, of course, subject to change, but this is what we expect. Then, the product of your policy guidance and our technical work is going to be a network plan. You'll still have a couple more steps if you want to implement any service changes. And so the public will have more opportunities to comment and influence your final service changes, which could happen in 2019 or 2020 if you decide to proceed. So that's the overall timeline. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to ask. Chair Kennedy, I'm perfectly happy to take questions as we go. I also am happy to go through my presentation and then we can do questions.
Once you go through, and these guys aren't shy, so.
So, and shall I look to them for questions or look to you?
Yeah, I'll chime in.
Okay, great. So the purpose of today's discussion is, first of all, to introduce you to some important principles and trade-offs that arise in transit planning in any city. Second, give you a chance to ask me questions, particularly about this network plan and about your city. And when I say city, I really mean region. I'm sorry, I should say region. And finally, again, to prepare you for future policy decisions that are likely to be difficult. And regarding that difficulty, I don't know if you are aware that my firm redesigned the bus network for Houston, Texas. And Houston is one of only 2 American cities that had growing transit ridership in the last couple of years, partly because of that redesign that we did. The really important thing to know about that, our work on Houston, is it was not easy. Nothing about that project was easy. And whenever you hear about, the redesign of the Houston bus network, it didn't cost a dime, right? Budget neutral redesign of the bus network that raised transit ridership. But money is not the only currency, right? Controversy and pain are another form of currency. And those are political currencies. And that was something that the leaders in Houston actually spent in order to raise bus ridership. So if you want to know what the Houston redesign was like, and the ways in which it was hard, and the ways in which your job might be hard here, I encourage you to go to my boss's blog. It's called Human Transit, and look up a story that's called Houston, Don't Let Us Make It Look Easy. And that is probably the best preparation you could have for thinking about the choices you might get to make a year from now on a future network plan. Houston, Don't Let Us Make It Look Easy. The blog is called Human Transit. All right, so there's been a lot of talk in Sacramento about bus ridership. There's concern that not just bus ridership, transit ridership, that ridership is going down, and concern about why, theories about why. And then part of why we've been hired to work for you is to show you ways that you could increase transit ridership. So what causes transit ridership to begin with? First of all, agencies that achieve high ridership achieve it because they are focused not just on total ridership, but on ridership per unit of cost. So for every investment they make, for every bus and driver that they put out there for an hour, they are asking themselves not just how many riders did we get, but how many riders did we get compared to what we would have gotten if we deployed the service in a different way. That is the kind of focus that gets you higher ridership if you want higher ridership. And the word for that in transit, a word I'm sure you already know, is productivity. Ridership relative to cost. Boardings per hour of service, per hour of a bus and driver that you're spending out there. High productivity arises from a four-legged stool. Transit service, land use, road design, and pricing. And I mean pricing not just of the transit, which matters, but also of the alternatives, like how much does it cost to own and drive and park a car. You will notice, I'm sure, that in your role here at RT, you only control the transit service and the pricing of transit. You do not control land use and road design, yet these have huge, huge impacts on the ridership you get on the system and on the ridership you get relative to costs. There's something called the ridership recipe, which is a strategy for getting high ridership. And you get high ridership from frequent all-day service and all-week service that follows patterns of density, walkability, linearity, and proximity. And I will explain each of those in turn in just a moment. Why does this tend to get cities high ridership, frequent service following these particular land use patterns? The reason is that this gets the most useful destinations within a reasonable travel time of the most people. Because frequent service means their waits are short, they can transfer easily between routes. When you're in dense places, you're near lots of people, and your operating costs are low. And I'll explain each of these in turn. Density. How many people are going to and from the area around each stop? Density can be a scary word. It comes up a lot in community conversations because density brings traffic and it brings noise and it blocks people's sunlight. But it's a very simple principle. In a mathematical sense, all it means is how much stuff is in a given area. And when you are running a bus and you are stopping at bus stops, the number of potential riders getting on your bus at every bus stop is limited by the amount of stuff near that bus stop. Density is the first order factor in how much ridership you can get per unit of cost. How many people are going to and from the area around each of your bus stops? Walkability. Can people near your bus stops actually get to your bus stops? I'm sure we can all think of places in the region where people cannot easily get to something that they can see. Maybe they can't get there because the road or the sidewalks don't go through. Maybe there's some kind of right-of-way blocking their way. Maybe there's a freeway blocking their way. Or maybe it's just a very busy arterial and they can't cross the street. So the bus might drop them off on the wrong side of their arterial. They can't cross and get home on the side that they want to be on. Street connectivity has a very big impact on walkability. So in areas where there are lots of streets making lots of connections, many more people will be within a reasonable walk of a bus stop than in areas with very few streets or streets that don't connect through, and lots of cul-de-sacs. Linearity, this is very particular to transit. This is not a problem that you can relate to by thinking about roads or even bikeways. Can transit run in straight lines that are useful to through riders? One of the things that people find the most frustrating about transit is when it takes them out of direction. So in order to go to X, they have to first go to Y, and it's not on the way. People find this incredibly frustrating. But it is also a problem for you because it is expensive. Poor linearity means you spend more of your budget running buses down cul-de-sacs, up hills, and out of direction before you actually take people in the straight lines that they would rather travel in. So linearity has two effects. It makes the transit feel less useful to the rider, and it makes the transit more expensive for you to provide. And finally, proximity, which really has that second effect of making transit more expensive for you to provide. Does transit have to cross long, low ridership gaps? In transit, distance is time, and time is money. The longer your buses have to drive, the more you're spending to get to a place. And so if you have to cross a long, low ridership gap to get to the same number of people and the same number of jobs, you have to spend more per rider. Your productivity is going to be lower. So density, walkability, linearity, and proximity. If you just kept those things in mind and evaluated every land use proposal you heard in light of those, I think it would serve you very well, and it would serve this agency well. I want to look at a little bit of information about your region and talk about it with these factors in mind. So this is a map. The contrast is a little bit better on that projector. This is a map of change in residential population density from 1990 to 2016, so the last 27 years approximately. Areas that have depopulated are in pink. Areas that have increased in population density are in green. And so what you can see, unsurprisingly, you all know this from knowing your region, is quite a lot of growth at the edges of the region. And I don't know if you're surprised to see depopulation, that the inside of your city is actually hollowed out, in a sense. Fewer residents near each given bus stop on most of your transit network than there were in 1990. So no surprise, transit ridership has gone down. In fact, if you look closely and follow, the light rails are not shown on this map, but knowing where they are, I would say population density has particularly gone down around the light rail lines. I don't think that's the light rail line's fault. It's just that growth has been so concentrated in other places. So then thinking about those ridership recipe factors, in particular proximity. Look at all this growth that is so unproximate from the rest of your network. You've had to spread your transit service thinner to reach it farther without an increase in your budget. In fact, weathering decreases in your budget. When you spread transit thin, that means reducing frequency, shortening spans, not offering weekend service or midday service. That's how you run farther within the same budget. So no surprise your frequencies are lower, your spans are shorter than they used to be. No surprise your ridership is lower. There are fewer people around each of your bus stops than there used to be. So this is a land use pattern and a growth pattern that will deliver lower ridership. And it is not because of the action of RT. It's the action of RT's partners, many partners all working together. So this is where RT can inform the conversation but can't actually control anything. Now, you can run more service to these farther away places, of course, and you are serving many of these places. But the farther you go, the lower frequency you can offer. The farther you go, the shorter span you can offer within the same budget. If you have more money coming in, by all means tell us, and we'll tell you how to spend it. But if you're working within a fixed budget, going farther means lower frequencies, shorter spans, less ridership. Proximity really matters. The effect is even more severe if we look at change in job density. Huge growth in jobs, again, far from the center of your network, far from existing service. And some pretty striking loss in jobs, not right in the core of downtown around the Capitol, but certainly along your rail lines and along your bus network. So same dynamic. Every bus stop you have, if on average there are fewer jobs near your bus stops, you're going to have less ridership. So I'm happy, actually.
We have a question.
Yeah.
Can I just ask, what's the data set you use for this? 'Cause
hold on, I have to get a little closer to the screen.
I can't read the screen. Probably nobody else can either.
This is census data about jobs. The University of Minnesota makes the census blocks match up between 2002 and 2014.
Same for the last.
The last one is census data, but it's different years in the last one. So this is 2002 to 2014. The last one, residential, was 1990 to 2016.
Yeah, but the reason I ask is, and I don't know if SACOG has been providing any of this data to you, but for us from 1990 to 2010, those two censuses, the central part of Sacramento, the population went up about 20,000, but it wasn't reflected on your previous map. So I don't know. I get the point, the larger point, but I think we want to double check some of the data. The point is salient. I'm not sure if the data driving it is consistent with what we know.
Okay.
Director Cerna?
Yeah, I'd just like to add that I noticed the same thing, had the same concern. I would just offer this as an analogy. This is like trying to understand the difference between speed and acceleration, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're looking at change. we know, because as you mentioned as you prefaced and before you got to the slide, we know our districts, our cities, our counties pretty darn well. And I can tell you that I'm not going to necessarily believe that the statement that we're less dense in the downtown areas, the midtown areas, than this map would have us represent. In fact, I would say we've gone the other way. But we're being compared to places like Natomas, which 25 years ago didn't have any population, some parts of it. So, by comparison, of course, there's going to be a lot of green where you once had vacant rice fields, and now you have 5 units to the acre. But I think it's a little disingenuous to say that that the density has spread just to the suburbs.
Thank you. That's a great point. And actually, we have many other maps, one of which just shows density. This is change in density.
That's my point.
Right? The maps that show density, you'll see very clearly that central Sacramento is the densest part of the region by far.
And it's gotten denser.
Yeah. But this really highlights the growth. Another thing I can mention is that, vast majority of the growth in in your service area, the SAC-RT service area, has been in single-family households rather than in apartments. And there's nothing wrong with that. But that's just another illustration of the way your growth pattern has been. It has been in lower densities.
I wanted one more thing to be present in the conversation, and it's really for optimization purposes. When we designed the network we have, it was based on a certain family structure, a certain number of people per household. But some of the data you're showing, like if you look at the pocket area of Sacramento, you probably don't know where that is, but the rest of us, there's like a pink blob in the center of it. I have a feeling that has to do with kids aging out of homes, and maybe even some people passing while somebody's still living there. So the demographic changes in some of these neighborhoods do represent families growing up, particularly some of those areas where in the 60s and 70s they were having children. As they grew up and left, those families are just not being replaced in the same way. The children and other people that would account for population. I don't know if you can adjust this for that, and so as we plan, I don't know how we incorporate the changes in family structure and population sort of regeneration, the whole like 2.1 replacement rate that we need versus what we're doing in our region for population growth. But it would be interesting to know that, because that will impact long-term population trends for the route optimization.
Director Budge.
So can we assume that there are also maps, companion maps, that show where the gaps will be filled in over the next 10 to 20 years?
Do you mean the
frame?
gaps in density or gaps in development?
No, the things that currently look like leapfrog may not be leapfrog in the same planning period that you've got, that these slides depict. They would have filled in by then.
With development.
Correct.
Yeah, we can certainly have maps that, we're not land use forecasters, but you have land use forecasters, development forecasters working in your region. And so we'll show that information.
We
as
would
well.
assume that you would look at all at the county, and just as the conversation before about the Jackson Corridor, you would look at the approved plans and zoning codes and general plans of the rest of the jurisdictions within the SAC-RT service area.
Yes, and other people have made excellent maps showing exactly that. Right. And so we will include those as well. Yeah.
Director Harris.
So this may be getting a little ahead of your presentation, but instead of land use forecasting, we need you to look at land use initiatives that are already, in place. So we have the Downtown Housing Initiative, which was a plan to get 10,000 new dwelling units in the center of the city of Sacramento in the next number of years. And we have the Rail Yards project. We have many projects that are planning and will come to fruition in the next 5 to 8 years. So it's going to be very important to take those into consideration, not in terms of forecasting, but they are happening.
Yeah, and of course, some of you will have noticed, while this map shows change to 2016, the map showing job density change actually only goes to 2014. So you may be aware of things that have happened just in the last couple of years that aren't really captured here.
That's what I'm alluding to.
Yeah.
There's a lot happening.
So my point in showing you this isn't to say that anything's going wrong, except it's just to say that you are you're under pressure as an agency to go farther, to cover more distance with the same amount of transit service. And the only way to do that is to provide transit service that is somehow thinner. I use the word thin as that's sort of an artistic use of the word thin. Transit service is thinner if you have a lower frequency, longer waits, or if you shorten the span, maybe you don't run on weekends. So this is just the geometric problem. If you need to go farther, you will have to do it by reducing the frequency or the span of your transit service.
Only to the extent that the destinations have remained the same and not gone farther. If the destinations of the people, if the population has moved out farther, but the destinations that they need to reach have also moved out with them, then you're not necessarily running a thinner service.
Unless people's actual
you're
travel
just trying
distances,
to connect people to
local
where they
destinations.
Need to go.
Yeah, what we're seeing so far is that people's travel distances are going up, not down. So people are their jobs move out to the edge, but they may actually live in a different part of the region and now have to travel farther. We're not seeing travel distances get shorter. We're seeing them get longer. And so that's another way actually just to think about your job as a transit agency. If people's travel distances get longer, your job is to provide people with longer rides, because that's sort of what the market is demanding. But that requires, again, driving farther within the same budget. So if I sound like I'm suggesting that you might need a larger budget to achieve your goals, I don't mean to suggest that. I'm happy to tell you how you can achieve your goals within your current budget, but it does face you with some difficult choices. Okay. So I brought up frequent service. I mentioned, that the ridership recipe is provide frequent all-day service that follows patterns of density and walkability, linearity, and proximity. Why frequency? Why is frequency an important part of the formula? It is difficult for people who don't ride transit very much to understand frequency. Most of the time, I drive or I ride a bike or I walk. And when I do all of those things, I leave whenever I want to leave. So there's really nothing like frequency in my travel experience. So the closest I might get, if I didn't ride transit very much, is maybe a very slow elevator in a very big building, where you can't actually get where you're going until you've waited for this thing to come and you're not in control of it. Or maybe a very long traffic signal, but even that is just 3-4 minutes long at worst. So the metaphor that we suggest people think about is, imagine that there's a gate at the end of your driveway and it only opens once an hour. And you cannot actually go do what you want to do until that gate opens, which means you have to be standing out there by your car with all your stuff ready at the time it's supposed to open. Because if it opens and you're not ready, it closes and you've missed it. And this is actually what it's like to live your life on an infrequent bus line, on a bus that only comes once an hour. An important thing to keep in mind here is, as awesome as real-time information is, real-time information about exactly when your bus is coming, it's wonderful. But it does not solve the problem of waiting. It makes the anxiety lower, but you still have to wait to use infrequent transit, even if an app will tell you when your bus is coming. Imagine you start work at 8 o'clock, the bus goes past your workplace at 8:05 a.m. You can be either 5 minutes late or 55 minutes early. You're going to a movie, it starts at 4:30, the bus can get you there at 3:45 or 4:45, so you're 45 minutes early. It's great that the app tells you when the bus is coming by so that you don't have to wait at the bus stop, but infrequent transit forces you to wait either at the start of your trip or at the end of your trip, unless you just happen to get lucky. So that's why technology can't actually solve this problem of frequency. Frequency will always throttle people's ability to leave when they want to leave and arrive when they want to arrive. High frequency means your ride is always coming soon. And this has 3 completely distinct benefits that people respond to. One is that they have much shorter waits. That's obvious. Another, though, is that they make easier connections between routes. This is not so obvious. When you have 2 frequent routes that cross, For example, you're line 51 and one of the light rail lines. Those are two frequent lines and they connect. That means someone can plan a trip to ride from one and transfer to the other and know that that transfer will be short and reliable. That they won't be waiting at a bus stop for 50 minutes to make that transfer. They'll wait at most 15 minutes. Great. So frequency turns a bunch of routes into a network that people can easily use to go from anywhere to anywhere. People don't have to just be on the right bus line that is also takes them to their job. They can actually make a transfer to another bus line very easily. And then the third power of frequency is that it reduces the impact of disruption. So the world is a chaotic place, as I'm sure this afternoon's weather reminded us all. With a frequent transit line, if something happens to your bus, another one is coming soon. If you have an hourly bus and something happens, your next bus is a whole hour later, right? But if you have a 15-minute bus and something happens, at worst, the next bus is 15 minutes late. And that is not something that, again, that a smartphone can provide. Only the regularity of frequent service can provide that. Another way that we can know that frequency is very powerful in inducing ridership is by looking at your own data. So I'm giving you little sneak peeks of this data, by the way, all of which will be in the Choices Report at the start of April. So I hope to be whetting your appetite here. This is a chart. I'm actually going to come, what do I do? No, I'll use the pointer. This is a chart, a scatter plot, if you remember scatter plots from high school. On the x-axis, the horizontal axis, is frequency, midday on a weekday, from high frequencies, meaning 5, 10, 15 minutes, on the left, over to hourly frequency on the right. And then on the y-axis, the vertical axis, is productivity, which is ridership relative to cost. Boardings per hour that a bus and driver are out there. And as you can see, there is this noticeable upward shape to this cloud of dots. Each of these dots is one of your bus routes. So for example, up here is the 51. It is plotted here because it comes every 15 minutes, and it does about 35 boardings an hour. That's a lot of ridership relative to the cost. And I mean an hour. When I say an hour, I don't mean an hour of the day that the 51 is available. I mean an hour of an individual bus and an individual driver's time, because that's what drives your operating costs. And the 51 has many, many buses and drivers on it at any given moment, providing that high frequency. So we see that more frequent routes not only get more ridership, they get more ridership relative to cost. You spend more on them. You supply those routes with more buses and drivers to make them more frequent, and in return you get a more than proportional response in ridership. And we see this in Sacramento and in everywhere else. This is another plot, same thing. The dots are all individual routes, frequency on the horizontal axis, productivity on the vertical axis, and this is from 24 cities in the United States. And you see this upward curve. Routes that are more frequent tend to have not just higher ridership, but disproportionately higher ridership. People are responding to the frequency in a very powerful way. So where is the frequent service in your region? This is a map of your network, the transit network, but we have color-coded the routes based on their frequency. And this is a map of the weekday rush hour. So the red lines are buses and light rail that come every 15 minutes or better. And then the darker blue lines come every 20 to 30 minutes, and the light blue lines come every 60 minutes. And you can see you have a bit of a frequent network going here at the weekday peak. In addition to light rail, you have a couple of bus lines that come every 15 minutes. And there are a couple of places where they make connections with each other. This is a map of weekdays at noon, so not quite as much frequent service, because some of your frequent service is focused on the rush hours. So this weekday noons is, you could think of this as a time when students may be coming and going, but also this is when service and retail workers really commute. Whether they started a Starbucks shift at 5 in the morning and now they catch the bus home, or maybe they're going to a restaurant shift and they'll get off work at 10 at night. That's who's really riding in the midday. But as you can see, there's a little bit less frequency than there is during the peak. Here we are on a weekday at 7 p.m. And the only remaining frequent routes are the 30 on J Street and this little parking lot shuttle for Sac State. Everything else is turned down to every 30 minutes. So not only does that mean people's commutes or waits take longer for the first bus, it also makes it harder for people to transfer between lines, transfer from light rail to bus or from bus to bus. What about on the weekends? On the weekends, frequencies really fall off. Now we have only a few 30-minute routes, and the remaining routes come every 60 minutes. And of course, as many of you know, you have routes that only run on weekdays and don't run on weekends at all in your communities. This is Saturdays at noon, and this is Sundays at noon. Really just light rail and a couple bus lines are coming every 30 minutes. So frequencies in your network are fairly low, but what you get as a result of providing relatively low frequencies is you get a lot of coverage. You actually cover a lot of area with some service. Not frequent service, but some service. That's what you get in exchange. So what is your current service, your current coverage by frequent service and by any service? Here is coverage within a quarter mile of all the residents in your service area by any service. 55% of residents in a pretty large service area are near some kind of transit service. Now, it might only come weekday rush hours, or it might come weekdays only, or maybe it comes 7 days a week. 55% are within walking distance of any service, but only 11% are within a quarter mile of frequent service. For jobs, slightly better coverage. 66% are within a quarter mile of any service, and 29% are near frequent service, which we can understand because jobs are fairly centralized, this being a state capital. So lots of jobs right near the very center of your network. So I don't know that I really need to make this point anymore about the power of frequent service, but I'll make it anyway. Boardings. Of your existing transit boardings, 59% are on your frequent bus network. Even though only 11% of residents and 29% of jobs are near your frequent network, 59% of your boardings are on the frequent network. So it's clearly your most competitive product. Say you were thinking like a business, you would say, whoa, that is selling like hotcakes. Why, right? So no wonder some people are curious about whether you should be selling more of that. But anyone in my position should be asking you the question, is higher ridership what you really want? Because it's not a given, and it's not the only good thing that transit can do. And in fact, it trades off against some other really good things that transit can do and that transit does do. This is what we call at JWA a plumber's question. Plumber's question, this is apocrypha at this point, arises because at the JWA office 5 years ago, the garbage disposal sink mechanism broke, and the plumber came and told Jarrett, my boss, okay, he said, I can do it for you really quick. I have the part, but I can get it done in 2 days. It's really not going to last that long. You'll probably need to have me back in a year or two. Or I can go order the part, and the right part will be here in a week, and then I can fix it, and it'll last for 10 years. It'll last longer than you're in this house, but you'll have to wait a week with no sink. Which do you want? And Jarrett said, I don't know, you tell me. And the plumber said, no, I get to ask you the question. Do you want it quick or do you want it durable? There's no right answer. And I don't know what Jarrett actually picked. I think he might have picked quick, but it was a lesson for him about his job as a technician, as a transit planner, is not to answer that kind of question, it's to ask that kind of question. Because there is no technically correct answer to that question. And similarly, in transit, there are certain questions that have no technically correct answer. And so I will not answer them for you, but I will ask them, and I will give you everything you need to think about them and talk to your constituents and check with your own values and then answer them for yourself and for this agency. That is the plumber's question. So how to balance ridership, maximizing ridership with your other goals is a plumber's question. If you want to maximize ridership, that would mean thinking like a business. How many times have people told you, you're all public servants, you work in the public sector, that the government should do more thinking like a business? Well, here is an example of how you could think more like a business. You would choose which markets to enter based on where you think your product can succeed relative to your costs. And This would not be the same as meeting people's needs or expectations. Businesses do not, for the most part, meet needs and expectations. They target markets where their product is competitive and where their costs are low. So here's a little fictional city to help you picture not just what maximizing ridership looks like, but also what the converse looks like and why that can be so beneficial. Imagine this little city. The roads are in lines, and then these little dots are residents and jobs in the city. And you are the transit agency for this city, and you have 18 buses to deploy every day. You have these two main roads with lots of jobs and density along them, lots of stuff to get to. And then you have other side roads with some people living on them and some jobs. If someone came to you and said, I want you to maximize ridership. I want you to just take your entire budget and get as much ridership as you possibly can. Think like a business. Here is what you would do. You would choose which markets to enter. The straight lines in your town offer density and walkability, and a very efficient transit path that people will find direct. So you focus all your service there. And because you are focusing your service on only 2 transit lines and not long transit lines, short ones, you get to provide very frequent service. You have all 18 buses on those 2 lines, and so a bus is always coming soon, which means the people on those main roads find the service incredibly convenient for many of their trips. They don't even have to look at a schedule. They just know that a bus is going to be coming soon if they go to the stop. And it's very easy for them to make a transfer. They get off one bus and get on the other. The bus is always coming soon. So you would get very high ridership. And the way that you would brag about this network is you would say this is a very productive network. Relative to our cost, which is these 18 buses and drivers running all day, all year, we get the most ridership we possibly can. But if you took this to the city council in this fictional little town and you said, here's your ridership maximizing network, you're going to get lots of ridership from this, they would probably be horrified, because they look at this map and they'd say, oh my gosh, what about Mrs. Smith? She lives down here. And she has been riding the bus for 22 years, and she also has back trouble. There's no way that we will ruin her life if we pull the bus route off that street. She absolutely needs that service. And they're right. I mean, that's absolutely true. So you would then probably say, oh, okay, well, I'm perfectly happy to make sure that Mrs. Smith and other people in similar situations have access to service, but that's a different kind of network. Would you like me to do that? And you might say, yes, please, design us a transit network, make sure everybody has access to service. And then you would design this transit network. You would design a network that makes sure that there is some service for everyone, no matter where they live, no matter where they're going. This is more like a traditional government service. You serve everyone, even in expensive to serve places. And that the result is that you have routes covering everyone. Every street in your town has some service on it, but because each route just has 1 or 2 buses on it, the bus is never coming soon. The buses come about once an hour. Most people don't find them convenient. Some people do. So you get some riders, but most people don't find them convenient. Or maybe the buses don't run on the weekends because you can't afford that. You get a more complex network and you get lower ridership. But the way you brag about this network is you brag about its coverage. You come to your city council and you say, I have designed you a wonderful network that makes sure 100% of our town is covered with service. Everyone has access to service.
How are we doing on time?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
I should ask you, how are we doing on time?
When's the next bus coming?
We have 2 slides left.
Okay, good.
So both of these goals are really important. Ridership goal, people care about high transit ridership because they want to see lower VMT, because they want to reduce carbon emissions, because they want to reduce congestion. They want to increase the number of people who can access jobs. But people care about coverage because they want to make sure everyone has access, everyone has some independence to move around their region. They don't want anybody to be trapped in their home or trapped in their neighborhood, regardless of their ability to own a car or drive a car. So both of these are really laudable goals. I think all of us probably feel that these are important to us to a certain degree. But what's difficult in transit is that they are on a spectrum. And the thing about a spectrum is when you move towards one side of it, you move away from the other. They trade off against one another. The more you focus your transit service in places where transit is competitive and where you get high ridership, the less service you have available to spread out and make sure you're covering everyone. The more you spread service out to make sure that you're covering everyone, the less you have available to focus into frequent all-day, all-week routes in key places. This is why they trade off against one another, and this is the absolute hardest thing about transit.
But there's an important caveat to that, right? That your budget stays static.
Bingo. This is a trade-off that exists in a fixed budget. It exists in any fixed budget. So even if you told me our budget is going to increase by X amount, you'd still have this trade-off, but it would be a little less hard as you move towards a higher budget. So this is really, I think, the biggest and hardest thing that is likely to come up in this network plan for you. And so that's why I wanted to flag it for you now, and so you can start thinking about it. As I said, at the beginning of April, we'll publish the choices report. It will include those 2 maps as well as many other maps and other analysis of your system. And it will point out some key choices for you to think about. This will surely be one of them, but there will be others. So I'm happy to take any further questions you have, or if you just want to express concerns or hopes for this study, I'm happy to hear those.
Director Budge, and then we do have public comment question.
Do we get access to your slides, to your PowerPoint?
Yes.
Thank you.
I believe the board administrator will see to that.
Thank you.
I'll make sure you get a copy.
Thank you.
Any others? Okay. We will go to public comment. Robert Copeland.
Would you rather sit or stand?
Stand.
We're keeping it at 3 minutes, but feel free to
Keep it short.
keep it short.
Okay, I was supposed to go to a Sacramento tenants union meeting, but when I was going to speak about, I got pulled today. But I'm still glad I came because I learned a lot. Infill would be a great for Sacramento and the low rider districts areas, whether it's jobs or housing. Have you gone to the public outreach, like a town hall meetings, neighborhood association, and find out why people are not riding the RT? And how many stakeholder meetings have you actually done so far about route optimization? I think you should do more of that, to tell you the truth. I'd like to see more public transit, to tell you the truth. But I don't think RT can do it. And how long will it take for this route optimization be done, completed, if we're going to 2020? I'd like to have those few answers answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. And we are just getting started in the process. Rick Hodgkins.
Finally, I get to speak on this for the first time. I just wish that my fellow colleague from Ride Downtown 916, Mike Barnbaum, I wish he was here tonight because I'm sure he would have had a whole lot to say about this. The first thing I'm going to say is any bus line that feeds into a light rail station, regardless of whether people agree or not, that bus should run as frequent and as long as light rail. Second is, it's good that we have light rail trains that run extensively on nights when Golden One Center events take place. But what about the bus lines that feed into those light rail stations? Like, if I wanted to go see a Kings game tonight, yes, I can get as far as Mather Field on light rail, but that would be it. I would be stranded. And based on what I heard during the presentation tonight, can we make this happen? Under our current budget, absolutely not. And everyone knows why. Absolutely not. Because we have Republicans, both where I live in Citrus Heights and outside this room, thank you, outside this room, that don't give a hoot about transit. I mean, look at what Governor Schwarzenegger did. You know, he thought that our system was a waste, and I don't agree with him. So, also the cost of, you know, some of us have no choice than to live out in the suburbs. You know, we have the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act and the Fair Housing Act that in a de facto manner tell lowlifes like myself on Section 8 exactly where we can and cannot live and what kind of a unit we could live in. Yes, I could live closer to the downtown core, but that would mean living in a slum, a dump, a rat trap. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm sure we all agree and wish that Mike were here as well. Sarah Kerber.
Hi, Sarah Kerber with the Sacramento Transit Riders Union, and I would just like to request that a copy of the presentation be made available to members of the public, including myself and anyone else that's interested. If you could email a copy out.
We actually have them here available for you.
Is there a way to get a digital copy of that?
For a small nominal fee.
I don't know if it's large enough that we can send it out from
Do you
our
have a
server.
copy available to everyone in the room?
That I think we have enough for those that may want it. I don't know that everybody wants it.
Maybe we can just post it on our website.
That would be great. Okay, so my comments tonight are about the public engagement and outreach that is going to be conducted by AIM Consulting. So far, nothing has been scheduled. They have reached out to us, so we're looking forward to engaging in that with them. We have been spoiled, I think, by the WAT I-80 process, which was so good and thorough. We would love to see something similar happen with the route optimization process, where robust engagement in a variety of forums is held in communities that are impacted by this. We want all riders, especially transit-dependent riders, to have an opportunity to participate, including seniors, riders with disabilities, riders with limited English proficiency, low-income and communities of color. All of these riders should have an equal opportunity to participate in this process. This is going to be the biggest change in our transit system in decades, and we think that SAC-TRU thinks that a robust process for participation is going to be necessary. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jeffrey Tartagia.
Frequently right now on the weekends, you used the example of 51, is for with a disability, scooter or anything else, you have no supervisors and you have to wait hour, 2 hours, even on the 51, because it can only handle 2 individuals. One of the things I don't see considered in here is where a route is overmaxed for its ability. So please put that in your consideration. Put in there, as I noticed you have both the one, and I saw the 87, which surprised me a little bit, but because that's one of your shorter time period routes as far as it going in with every 30 minutes. So interesting to see what some of the information that you've collected and pulled out of there. Do hope that to be engaged. Do hope that you consider other factors that are also around through there. You're only talking about RT, but as I will turn around and say to you, 29th Street is impacted by Elk Grove. The J Street is impacted by commuter lines through there. These are impacts that impact and delay, shall we say, Bus 30's time schedule service. I don't know that you're considering that or even aware of that. I hope that you will be aware of there's other factors that are mitigating and changing things, as well as the convention center and everything else. You'll have repeatedly about Route 30 that as timely, as busy as it is, it will be constantly delayed. And with the arena events, it also is constantly delayed. Those are things that in that ridership event, I would say to you, as loved much as I need it and want it, I want to make sure what is going on, and communication is one of RT's struggles.
Thank you. Russell Rawlings.
Good evening again, Chair Kennedy and members of the board. I'm Russell Rawlings. I'm a member of Sacramento Transit Riders Union, also a board member of Organized Sacramento and Director of Advocacy Services at Resources for Independent Living. Forgotten where I work. I've been here so long. I am also a former Houstonian, though, and it's been a bit weird for me to watch as the world has focused on Houston as a model for transit, because I never knew what riding a Metro bus was like. I have yet to ride a Metro bus, and I lived in Houston for 15 years. And so I do acknowledge a lot of what our presenter was giving us. However, the alarming thing for me was the very beginning of the presentation, and I think that a number of the board members noticed it as well. It's that we don't have a good understanding of our Sacramento region in this process, and that's alarming. And we knew this was going to happen. We told you this was going to happen. This is what you get when you hire an outside contractor that gives you population shifts from 1990, when I wasn't even living here, hadn't even graduated high school, and had just moved to Houston, actually, from West Texas. So it's, I think, necessary that the data that's presented going forward actually means something to our region. On the flip side of that, I've also been torturing myself lately with looking at housing prices elsewhere. And in the Houston downtown area, you can have a condo, pretty sizable one-bedroom condo, for $125,000. So I think all of you need to think pretty practically about the decisions that are being made and just what that does actually mean. If you increase frequencies only in your little target-rich environment, you're really excluding 90% of your ridership. So, thank you.
Thank you, Russell, and thank you for making us all feel old.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah, very good. So that's all the cards I have. Is there any other comments or questions from the board? Chair? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for putting, there you are, I lost you. Thank you for putting this on our sort of thinking table as far as what we're going to be asked to decide, because you put that spectrum up there where, while both are laudable and worthy, they are incongruent and mutually exclusive. And so you mentioned a currency beyond a dollar of political capital, and I think that when this is laid before at our feet of what we want to prioritize, I hope this board has the political will to choose one or the other and go steadfastly toward that destination, because we can't be mealy-mouthed and try and find a middle ground that's just going to continue a slow bleed rather than rip off the Band-Aid like it says in here.
Let me add a little more detail there. A little bit of good news. You actually can choose a middle ground. They're not so much mutually exclusive as they trade off against one another, which means just that the more you do of one, the less you must do of the other. So the way that we often set this up for boards to give a policy level direction to their staff is, how much of your budget would you like to see spent towards a goal of maximizing ridership? And how much of your budget would you like to reserve for covering important places, important people, people with severe needs? So that you can serve both goals to the degree that you and your people, your constituents, want you to, while still giving actionable direction to your staff. Because it's very difficult for staff to be told both that they need to be delivering higher frequencies and longer spans, and also covering all these places and covering new places. They can't actually do both at the same time, and whichever they do, they will be yelled at for not doing the other. And so one way that you can give actionable input that still respects the value of both high ridership and wide coverage is to actually create, you could almost call it a firewall in the budget. With this part of our operating budget, we pursue this goal, and with that part of our operating budget, we pursue that goal. So we have set up that kind of a decision process for boards in other places, and they've found that successful.
Director Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to add a couple things. First of all, Laura started this with talking about how the name may not be the right name. And I think it's hard to capture all the things we're trying to wrestle with the idea of a network plan. because I think it does, in some ways, challenge us to think about what our values are, not only as an organization, but as a community, and how we serve the highest and best of those values. One of the things that didn't come up was equity, and we know that we'll have to have a strong equity focus in this plan because of the riders we serve. This is a utility to them. They don't usually, certainly our choice riders have other choices, but a lot of our riders don't have other choices. And so I think that's inherent in the conundrum you presented with coverage versus frequency. And I think that we have to figure out how to marry those ideas and continue to be an agency that brings that focus for how to get people through our system in a way that means something to them. Earlier tonight, somebody said we don't ever report back on pilots, and that's not true because we did do a pilot with Uber, Lyft, Yellow Cab on connectivity to light rail stations, and we reported back on that. And what was clear is a lot of people will use our system if it connects to other things, and people did take advantage of that incentive to take a TNC from wherever they were to a light rail stop to go downtown and then back and probably use it again. And so how we anticipate those new modes, that's one of the other inherent challenges we're going to have. Bike share is coming as well. It certainly won't cover the region writ large, but there will be new modes. And I don't know in your planning documents how we capture that. The other thing that's not there is sort of that density has a momentum, and in some of these places, local zoning, entitlements, anticipated, and even issued building permits. But we know there are thousands of new homes being built in the various cities and jurisdictions that are represented here. And I think getting that data into the system as we work through this year-long process, that would be a really, really helpful thing to anticipate population. We have a housing shortage in some places, but we'll get new supply in some of those and even in other places where no housing exists yet. So I think those are kind of what we'll have to grapple with as a growing and very dynamic region.
So can I follow that, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, because I just want to reinforce what Director Hansen just said, because that was the gist of my question about, or my comment about filling in the gaps. We've got 44,000 dwelling units entitled. Mm-hmm. And you're right, market will dictate when they get built, but there are 44,000 dwelling units entitled, single family.
Thank you. So I'm looking at Henry. Given what we just heard today, and I think the punchline slide of the sliding scale, the spectrum, if you will, is a good point to note. But I jumped in the way I did about budget because I'm hoping that when we and the community and our riders are presented options and understanding the trade-offs, another variable in there, and perhaps I'm being overly optimistic, might be one that we want to include, which is, well, what happens if we're able to, through finding efficiencies, sustain some minor budget growth, or or go the other way too, and understand what along that sliding spectrum might be the first sacrifice if we ever had a recession, or a fraction of a recession compared to the last one we had. I think having that be a dynamic variable along with coverage and frequency is something we ought to plug into this model.
Yes, we're trying. We have been trying, and we're going to continue to try to reduce the cost and improve the efficiency. In the meantime, we're going to do the industry benchmark, to say where we are compared to our peer agencies. We will present those information to the board. And actually, Michelle and her team will present those benchmark information to the board too, and public, yes.
Well, and I appreciate that. I think this is obviously going to help inform us about how to adjust both our coverage and our frequency, but it also may function to help us better prioritize, things on our wish list in terms of our budget.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Yes, Director Jennings.
Just, I heard as far as the community is concerned, and we heard the public also want to make sure that they're engaged and involved. And so I just want you I heard you mention it 3 times that they would be involved. And I just want to kind of give some examples as to how the community gets involved and how do they know that their voice will be heard.
Yes. First, I want to say that for us, the process of planning is not separate from the process of consulting the public. And also, the process of consulting the public is not separate from the process of educating the public with what we've learned about your system. So every conversation with the stakeholders who are here, their friends, the people involved in their organizations, the general public, we want that to be a conversation in which they learn everything I said tonight and a great deal more, and also then give input that is meaningful and actionable. So because we're really focused on getting actionable input, one thing you'll notice is that as we consult people, we will not probably ask people very often to tell us, what do you want, and ask for their wish list. But we will often ask people, what do you want and what are you willing to give up to get it? How do you think RT should balance these competing goals? What is most important to you out of the things on this list? So we're going to be asking those kinds of prioritization questions as we go. Because ultimately we want you to have actionable input that you can act on over the next couple of years. And we know you have plenty of wish lists already as it is. So in what forums are we going to ask people those types of questions and ask them to influence this plan? The first one will be in April and May. We are organizing a stakeholder representative group. Nicole will be doing a great deal of the work on that. We're going to be asking community leaders and people involved in, certainly existing riders, also people involved in major businesses, civic organizations, churches, to spend half a day in a workshop where they learn themselves, have sort of become mini transit experts, and then with that knowledge, tell us and ultimately tell you how they think RT should balance these competing goals, should make some of these difficult trade-offs. So that will be a half-day workshop for stakeholder representative group. We will also be asking the public to come to events and talk with our outreach staff. We will have an online open house type of survey. And of course, as always, we will be corresponding by email and taking letters of comment. That will be in April and May. And that will just be in response to some abstract choices and trade-offs. Then, after the summer, we will actually design some alternative networks that are pretty detailed, that people can look at closely and think about, what would this mean for me, what would this mean for my community, or what would this mean for the people I represent? And again, we will pull that stakeholder representative group together, this time for a shorter meeting, and ask them to look at these alternatives and give feedback on these alternatives. Not just do they like one or the other, but also where on the spectrum illustrated by these alternatives, where do they think RT should be? And again, we will do online engagement, have public meeting, do some pop-up outreach events so that we reach people where they are, not necessarily where we want to have a meeting. And that will be in the fall. And then that's the most of the public involvement, once in the spring and once in the fall, on those 2 big phases of our work. Then at the end of the year, there will be a draft network plan. In our experience, the draft network plan is sometimes, it's sometimes not all that controversial because the really big trade-off and choice was in those 2 alternatives. And once people have had a chance to debate those and think about them, then what's in the draft network plan is known to them already. But the draft network plan will probably be produced in, like I said, the winter of next year. And at that point, there will again be a round of public comment on that plan before we bring it to you for adoption. From which point, if you consider any service changes or other changes, like if you're interested in seeking new funding, those would be, you might not see me after that, and that would be a separate process that you would take over after that point. Did that answer your question?
So I think it did. Based on the size of the region, these stakeholder representative group, how big of a group are we talking?
Our target right now is, I believe, 50 people. And to tell you the truth, there's no limit on how many people I like to have in the room. We've done this with 90 people. In Raleigh, North Carolina, we had a stakeholder group of 90 people. The limit is people's time. I mean, we're asking people to do a little work. To dedicate a number of hours, and not a lot of people can devote that kind of time. Or maybe they need to be at work during that time. So that's generally the biggest limit on numbers.
What is our role in helping you to identify stakeholders?
Your staff is working very closely with our team on making sure that all the right people are on the list. And we have a pretty big list right now of organizations, community groups that we want to make sure have an opportunity to send a representative. We also have a list of just businesses and other groups that might be interested in that.
Okay. So I asked you our role.
Your role.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you meant
I
you,
heard
the
you
board.
mentioned staff, so.
I was thinking agency.
Yeah.
I would love to have you involved in identifying stakeholders for that group, and maybe even making an email or a phone call to help us recruit them, since we do need to recruit them because they are contributing a big chunk of time. So we can definitely be in touch with you if you are willing to help us with that. That would be wonderful.
And also, in our April board retreat, Michelle and Jared are going to join us for about 2 to 3 hours time frame for all board members dedicated to this project discussion and feedback. And per discussion with Chair Kennedy and the Vice Chair, we're going to invite the STA board members who are not in this board, and also invite the board members in the SACOG who come from this county. So to join that exercise, to join the exercise in the board.
Director Harris.
So I would like to thank you for a very lucid and thought-provoking presentation. Since I've been on this board, we've struggled to keep this a functional and solvent utility that's useful for our riders. And we made a lot of strides to turn it around from kind of a downward spiral that had progressed over a decade. This is really an existential self-inquiry we're about to engage in. And I think it'll be probably the most important policy work that we do as board members for a long time to come. So I look forward to the process and the outcomes, and ready to get started.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item.
Moving on, item number 15, Paratransit Inc. Board of Directors written report in your packages from the special and regular meetings on January 17th. If Directors Hume or Hanson have anything further to add.
I'll try and keep my recap brief, given the late hour.
That would be good.
Yeah, the report in the agenda is fine.
Thank you.
Item number 16, Sacramento Placerville Transportation Corridor JPA meeting written report of February 5th in your package. If Director Budge has anything else to add?
Not unless Director Natoli has anything to add.
Okay,
we're cool.
Moving on, item number 17, Capitol Corridor Joint Powers Authority meeting of February 14th. If Directors Harris or Miller have anything else to add.
Yeah, sorry guys, just a brief comment. So the Capitol Corridor JPA has had a lot of interruptions to their service because of trespassing and equipment failures. And it's caused a temporary lull in ridership. And really what it comes down to is communication to the riders about alternative routes in real time and what exactly is happening. Passengers had been stranded for hours at a time. So it's actually a lesson for us. And RT, I think, does a much better job at communicating with their riders when we have, an interruption, bus bridges and all of that. RT actually does pretty well at that, but there's something to be learned from it. And lastly, we talked about, we talked about integration of payment technology, integration of fare payment technology. And it says in the staff report that I volunteered Sacramento to be part of that study. Actually, I suggested that this was a fertile market to explore possibilities of integrating different payment methods throughout the state. And because our Connect card is actually pretty highly evolved, that this might be a good market to participate in this kind
I
of
remember you
integration
volunteering.
study.
Now that you,
And Chair, so is this time for reports, ideas, and questions from board members?
Yes.
So I would like to ask the manager to bring a report back on the possibility and cost implications of committing to 100% zero-emission vehicle bus fleet by the year 2030, and consider the possibility of bringing a resolution to this board to exact that commitment.
Okay. Director Cerna.
Just 2 quick shout outs. I want to extend my thanks to Mark Lonergan for joining me to pay a visit to AC Transit. A couple weeks ago, we took the train down to meet with their executive team and to see for ourselves their hydrogen fuel cell fueling facility and the buses that are running on fuel cell technology. It was very eye-opening. And then I also wanted to thank our general manager, Henry Lee, who I asked, the chair and I both asked him to intervene and work collaboratively with some marketing and public relations professionals here locally on how best to get the information about the Voters' Choice Act out in our infrastructure, our advertising infrastructure, whether it be the rear and sides of buses and at our bus shelters. So thank you, Henry, for doing that.
Anything else? All right, we do have a short closed session. It will be short.
Let me just read the items.
Yes.
Conference with legal counsel pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9. Anticipated litigation, 1 case, and there will not be a report out of closed session.
And we'll recess to closed session.